Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is story about what if Naruto died at the Valley of the End and becomes Shinigami Part 1. Before I start, please do support for more amazing content and comments for Part 2. Do consider to subscribe my channel and share my video to your friends and check out the description as well. Let's start the video. There was an echoing silence as two figures glared at each other down. Naruto and Sasuke had been fighting for quite a while now, and this was going to be the final move, the final strike that ended this ferocious battle. By now, either of them looked human, and both resonated with a dark power. Naruto had drawn on the Kyuubi's power to the point where the chakra had become semi-solid. It had quickly leaked out and covered him, giving him the appearance of the nine-tailed fox, though he only had one tail at the moment. In his right hand, a small ball of whirling chakra, the Rasengan, was being formed. Sasuke had gone into the Curseal's second stage by drawing on its power to the point that it was beginning to affect his mental state. His appearance had changed from that of a normal, fair-skinned boy to a muddy gray color. His normally black hair was longer and smoky gray in color. He had two leathery hand-like wings coming out of his back which seemed to amplify the fact that he was no longer human. On his face, a cross-like mark had formed on the bridge of his nose. The only thing that had not changed during this transformation was his Sharingan, which whirled violently as he charged a Chidori in his left hand. Neither one would back down. Both had made a promise to themselves, one to another person. And now, this strike would determine who would keep their promise. Leaping forward, they quickly flew across the vast chasm that had kept them apart just moments before. As they flew, Sasuke's wings flapped with noticeable effort, while Naruto's tail seemed to act in the same way, propelling him forward. As they reached each other, they pulled back their respective arms, and let their attacks strike each other. Rasengan, Spiraling Sphere, Chidori, Thousand Birds, the two powerful techniques clashed, creating a small shockwave of energy. As they pushed their chakra at each other, attempting to end it, they pushed each other's chakra away from themselves. Slowly, a giant ball of dark purple, tainted chakra formed around the two, cutting them off from sight. As their attacks continued, the ball grew larger, and then darker in color. Within the ball, Naruto reached out his clawed hand, attempting to reach Sasuke. At that same moment, Sasuke reached his hand forward, fully intent on striking Naruto through his heart. For a brief second, Sasuke mentally paused. Did he really need to do this? Did he really have to kill his best friend in order to get the Manjikyu? Yes, it was the only way to do so, but would he sink as low as his brother to get that power? The power that his brother had obtained by massacring his entire clan. No, he wasn't his brother, he never would be. However, that moment's hesitation did not stop his hand, which plunged harshly into Naruto's chest. At that same moment, Naruto's body was drawn closer to Sasuke, making Naruto's clawed hand slam into Sasuke's skull. There was a near silent crack, as Naruto bashed Sasuke's skull in a few inches, killing him. As the energy finally began to dissipate, both of their bodies fell to the earth. With a silent thud, their bodies landed against the hard ground. The life had gone out of both of them, and neither of them moved as their souls left their bodies. Moments later, a light rain began to fall. Slowly, almost as if the heavens were weeping, the rain began to fall faster and harder. Within moments, the entire Valley of the End was under heavy rainfall. As lightning cracked and thunder rumbled, a third figure slowly walked up to them. Hatake Kakashi looked at their unmoving bodies, feeling his heart breaking as he looked them over. Sasuke's head crushed. Naruto's heart destroyed. He knew what had happened, though he would never have any proof, as the rain had washed their hands clean of the battle. After standing there for a moment, he found his own tears mixing into the rain. He slowly created a Kage Bunshin, shadow clone, to help him with what he was about to do. It would be a bad idea to bring them back into the village as they were. The villagers wouldn't like that. Quickly dragging them into a cave, he and his clone quickly ran through a string of seals, ending on the tiger seal. Taking a deep breath, they quickly reduced the bodies to nothing more than ash. It would be better this way. If he buried Sasuke's body, someone would try to take it to learn the secrets of the Sharingan like Orochimaru. And if he brought him back to the village, they would ask for his eyes as well. It was a never-ending cycle of greed. For Naruto, it wasn't exactly like that. He could be buried wherever, either right there, or in the village, it didn't matter. However, once they heard what could be guessed from what he'd seen, they would want his head. After all, now the last Uchiha loyal to Konoha was no longer alive. They would want retribution of some form. But there was also a selfish reason behind it. He didn't want to continually remember that he didn't do more for his sensei's son. That of all the things that he'd done, he hadn't once tried to do more for Naruto. Sure, he'd fought for him while he was young, told the Sandaime to give a portion of his salary to Naruto as an allowance, and made sure that he was on his team when he graduated. But in the end, none of it was enough. People still persecuted and attacked him. He was overpriced on food and forced to eat only what he could, and the other person he'd asked to be on his team had killed him. As he watched their bodies burn to ash, he sighed. This was no way to return to Konoha, unsuccessful in his mission, bringing in 2 bags of their ashes. Sakura's heart was going to break when she heard this. Sasuke had left the village and gotten killed. Naruto had gone after him to get him back and gotten killed. It was all ironic how things had worked out. The traitor dying before he could fulfill his dream of another's death, and the hero dying before he could fulfill his dream of protecting others. Two parts of one whole, and yet so different that it provided comedic humor when it was needed. So alike, and yet so different, Kakashi sighed as he and his clone put the ashes of both boys in a sealing scroll. They would be put in something proper later when the few people who truly cared for the boys could show up and say a few words. Probably not the biggest gathering, but at least they would be able to watch in peace. As he walked away, 4 figures watched him. 2 slowly faded away, needed to tell of what they'd seen. The other 2 slowly began to follow Kakashi back into Konoha, Orochimaru's lair. What? Kabuto winced as Orochimaru continued to yell. I'm sorry, sir, but I only speak the truth. Orochimaru glared at him, his appearance quite fierce in his new body. Despite the fact that he was now in a weakened state, he still held that same power that would be obvious to anyone. I want the one who killed Sasuke, I want his head on a platter, Kabuto mentally sighed. I already told you, the Kyuubi's vessel fought Sasuke, but he was killed when he killed Sasuke. They both died, and Kakashi incinerated both of their bodies. Orochimaru leaned back in his chair, silently thinking over this new information he'd learned. True, he did plan on killing Kakashi for the insolence of his actions, for burning the last remaining free Sharingan. However, even in death, Sasuke had managed to help his cause. By killing the Kyuubi's vessel, Akatsuki would be hard-pressed to find a way to make their weapon work. He had destroyed their plan without ever knowing how he'd helped. As a plus, Itachi might come out of hiding to try and get retribution for Sasuke's death by destroying Konoha. Kukukuku Sasuke-kun, even in death you served a greater purpose than you'll ever realize. Now, Akatsuki will find life so much harder as they attempt to modify their weapon to work without the Kyuubi. Yes, you have done well, Kabuto blinked as Orochimaru chuckled. Wouldn't they focus their energies on destroying Orochimaru now that there was no need for the Kyuubi? That would be quite problematic. However, without his ambition of getting the Sharingan from Sasuke, he will once again focus on Itachi. And they do not realize that I am currently free from Sasori's seal. Perhaps this will work out better than I thought. Kabuto just smirked as Orochimaru continued his dark laughter, listening as it echoed throughout his entire base. Akatsuki base. Are you sure your information is reliable? Zetsu nodded. Hi Leader-sama, I saw it with my own eyes. If they weren't dead before, then the copy ninja finished them when he incinerated their bodies. I see. Pain said as he stared into space. He thought over every part of the weapon that they had, trying to figure some loophole that could be used in case the Kyuubi was lost. But no matter how hard he thought, he was unable to come up with a plan that would work. All the other contingency plans had been if Ichibi, or some other weak Bijou had died. For the Kyuubi, the king of demons, to have died, he'd never factored that possibility in. After a moment, Itachi spoke up. If I may, Leader-sama, may I lead the investigation for destroying Orochimaru? Pain glanced over at Itachi. While he was obviously unaffected on the outside, he could feel rather than see that he was in a slight fit of rage. Obviously, hearing that his brother had died had hit him harder than he might admit. Is something wrong, Itachi? Itachi shook his head. We have simply let Orochimaru be a thorn in our organization's side for far too long. Because of him, we lost the Kyuubi, as well as a powerful weapon. I simply wish to remove the obstacle. Pain contemplated it for a moment before nodding. Do it. I do wish you good luck. Orochimaru is still a powerful shinobi. As Itachi slowly began to fade out, he softly said, so am I. As Itachi finished fading away, Deidara spoke up. Leader-sama, what do we do now? Pain glanced around the room, glancing at each of the individuals in the room. All of them were S-class criminals, all of which had done some kind of unpardonable crime that would get them killed should they remain alone. Now we will continue as we have. We will not seek after the Bijou to capture them, but to eradicate them. There is no need for our plan anymore, as the Kyuubi has fallen. However, we should not let these countries continue to use them for their own selfish needs. We will simply rid the world of such powers, and show them that we as a whole are stronger than even demons. A certain amount of respect comes with that. After a moment of muttering, all of the members slowly nodded, obviously accepting what their leader had ordered. A small, unnoticed smile crossed Pain's face. A few days later, there were several celebrations going throughout Konoha as they'd heard of the demon's demise at the hands of the Uchiha. While they didn't know what had happened to him, they continually asked for them to get him back. After all, what is a hero if he's not around to be celebrated? And since the law around the Kyuubi's secret had been lifted, they yelled to the high heavens about it as many began to drink to his death, leaving a lot of drunken people all over the place. Only a few people didn't attend these gatherings, the Rookie 9, Teen Guy, and their senseis to name a few. They had all been closer to Naruto, and had accepted him. They weren't sure how to react with Sasuke, but they guessed that it wasn't really all his fault. His brother had screwed up his mind, and Orochimaru's seal really hadn't helped the matter. After the first few days, Tsunade called a few people she knew to her office to give a short farewell to Naruto and Sasuke. As the people began to arrive, 2 shadowed figures appeared on the windowsill to watch the proceedings. They really had only heard about it since they had been following Kakashi around during the last couple of days. The shorter, blonde figure eventually spoke. You know, This could almost be considered funny if you would just freaking smile. The dark-haired broody boy glared at him. Shut up, Doe. Naruto sighed as he glanced back at the small funeral gathering in the Hokage's room. It was kind of weird attending his own funeral, especially since no one could see him. But all in all, it was moving to see how many people actually cared for the two of them. For Naruto, he actually had quite the gathering. A picture of himself was placed on the table behind some kind of weird jar. Apparently, unlike normal people, his body was burned to ash to keep people from desecrating his body, and to make it easier to move it when necessary. Among a few others, the main people he noticed in the room were Iruka, Kakashi, Jiraiya, Tsunade, Sakura, Neji, Hinata, Gaara, and Konohamaru. He wasn't sure why Hinata was there, but it was still pleasant to see her there. Sasuke's gathering was quite smaller, but was still there. Iruka, Kakashi, and Sakura were there for both of them as people who personally knew them, along with Ino, Lee, and Gaara who didn't know him as well. Sasuke was inwardly touched by even the small gathering, but was slightly irked that Naruto had more people there to mourn for him. After a moment, Tsunade stood up. We are gathered here today to share some final words for these two genin. If I may, I'd like to start. Seeing their encouraging glances, she went on. I can't say much for Sasuke, other than he was a major blockhead. Even though he'd been through a lot, he never seemed to notice that there were others who had it worse, even if it was in other ways. I'm not a blockhead. Sasuke mumbled, causing Naruto to chuckle. To think that Tsunade would say something so blunt about Sasuke was quite moving, especially since it seemed to poke at his nerves. After taking a slow, shaky breath, Tsunade continued. Naruto, however, was one of a kind. He had a heart of gold, although he wasn't one for petty words. He'd let his fists do more talking than his mouth, and that was actually admirable. He may not have realized how much this told everyone else, but it showed his true character when he fought. He was selfless in ways I myself don't understand, never believing that he was fighting for his own gain. He went off to get Sasuke back, because he didn't want to believe that Sasuke was that thick-headed. He wanted to believe that he wouldn't sink that low in order to gain power to kill his brother. I'm sure that he would have walked away once he realized that he was going on his own accord, but something kept him from doing this. A promise. Uzumaki Naruto never broke his promises. He fought Sasuke and won. He succeeded where others might not have. There was a light applause that went around the room. Tsunade walked away, tears slowly rolling down her cheeks as she sat down. After a couple seconds, Kakashi stepped forward. I may have known both of them better than most others, but there is still so much that I didn't know. How much Naruto was in pain because of his lack of family, Sasuke's pain because of seeing the death of his family. And yet, both of them shared a similar pain. Sure, Naruto never knew his family, but Sasuke had a chance to remember them. You know, I never thought of it like that before. Naruto mumbled as he listened to Kakashi continue speaking on different things he remembered about the two of them. After a moment, he turned back to Sasuke. Hey Sasuke, what dope? Sasuke asked. Before, he'd been looking into the room, but now his face was looking out over Konoha. What was it like to know your family? Sasuke winced, turning back into the room. I really don't want to talk about it. Please, I want to hear a little of what it was like. Naruto said, practically begging Sasuke. Sasuke thought about it for a moment. We have eternity, so I'll tell you later. Naruto stuck out his tongue before turning back to the different people. They'd more or less missed Sakura, Ino, and Lee's little speeches on each of them, although the waterfall of tears Lee was crying seemed to be more than humanly possible. After a couple seconds' deliberation, Hinata stood up. Ano, I can't say anything for Sasuke-kun. But I can say a few things for Naruto-kun. Naruto blinked as he noticed her face flush red. For the first time, he recognized it for what it was, a blush. His usually slow mind suddenly put two and two together for the first time in his life, causing him to suddenly slam his back against the wall, finger pointed at Hinata in something close to fear and shock. She has a crush on me? Sasuke tried not to chuckle. You just now realized that? I guess when the dope knows, everyone knows. Of course, Suna could have done without knowing how thick-skulled you are. Wait, you knew? Who else knew? Sasuke rolled his eyes. Dobe, everyone knew that she had a crush on you. Heck, her father probably knew, and he doesn't spend that much time with her. Naruto glanced back at her. Wow, I'm such a blockhead. After a couple of seconds, Hinata continued. Naruto-kun was a strong person. He wasn't a genius like Sasuke, but he worked hard. He had to work a lot harder than most of the other people in our class. YOSH. Surely he was brimming with, Lee said before Neji quickly pulled out a large club labeled, in case of emergency, and knocked Lee over. Neji glanced at Hinata apologetically before motioning for her to continue. Hinata smiled lightly as she continued. I know that most people didn't recognize Naruto. But he put his all into everything he did, more if he could. He would train for hours on end before collapsing from exhaustion, trying to get whatever he'd been working on done. Naruto blinked as he realized the only way for her to know so much about him. I never realized that I had my own personal stalker. Sasuke laughed. You really are dull. A vein on Naruto's head twitched. He quietly muttered under his breath. Watch it, team. After taking a shaky breath, Hinata continued. Ano, he had the confidence that I could only hope for, and I tried so hard to emulate that part of him. He never gave up despite the obvious opposition, and would always do his best in everything. But every time I tried to speak to him, I'd be frozen by my fear of disappointing him, even though he probably never noticed me. So even though it's too late, Hinata slowly walked towards Naruto's picture, fear evident on her face. As she stood before his picture, she blushed a red that would make an apple jealous. Then, unable to keep eye contact with even his picture, she bowed lightly. Naruto-kun, I really, really like you. You've inspired me to become stronger, and I hope to become strong like you were. I know it doesn't matter since you're already past, but I hope that you'll still be able to hear me. Naruto couldn't believe it. His mouth was practically on the floor, his eyes bugging out of his sockets. Someone admired him? Liked him even? It was almost too much for his mind to take in, and definitely more than Hinata could handle, seeing as she'd fainted after finishing what she'd said. If anyone had seen Naruto, they probably would have had a hard time containing their laughter. Speaking of people seeing him, Sasuke was smirking behind him. It was about time that he realized that someone liked him. Of course, it might have been better had she said it to him while he was alive. As for himself, he kind of wished that he had shyer fangirls. Then he wouldn't have any problem with them chasing him down the streets. After a couple of moments, having finally revived a fainted Hinata, Neji stepped forward. I hope that you can hear me wherever you are, Naruto. You have been an amazing inspiration. Because of you, I was able to let go of my self-destructive mindset, of believing that fate guided us to do what we do, and that we have no control over our destinies. Now, like you, I'll walk my own path and will attempt to change the Hyuga clan for the better. I will try to get rid of our curse seal, and prove that I am just as strong, if not stronger, than any other main member. Naruto, thank you. Unlike Hinata, he fully bowed to Naruto's picture, showing a great deal of respect for a person he just met in battle. Naruto grinned, punching his fist in the air. Go for it, Neji. You know, I never really knew Naruto like everyone else in the room, Gaara said, suddenly speaking up. A few people jumped at his sudden involvement in the conversation. But I'd like to say a few words. If it's alright with you, Hokage-sama? Tsunade blinked as she stared at Gaara. What did he have to say for the blonde? After a moment, she nodded. Go ahead, Gaara bowed. Thank you, Hokage-sama. Slowly turning back to Naruto's picture, he spoke slowly. Naruto-san, you have influenced my life in a good way, one that has been more powerful than even that of what my father did. And he'd been influencing me since before I turned 6 years old. You lived a life so similar to mine, constantly outcast from everyone else, a broken tool in the eyes of some. I myself was unable to take it, and eventually broke down and became a psychotic murderer, believing that my demon was my mother, that it was only through others' deaths that I was alive. It was a most pitiful existence, but it was also the only way I knew that worked. But you lived the same as me. And yet you pushed onward until you found people to accept you. And then you pushed the boundaries of that realm until you had more and more people surrounding you. You were motivated by your dream of protecting others and of becoming Hokage. You fought me, and defeated me and my principles. And there is a saying, that your enemy knows the person behind the mask when they fight in a battle that risks their life, because you cannot afford to hold back your true self. I saw the real you during that time, so I feel that I understand you a little better than most of the people in this village. I hope that you will allow me to revise my principles by borrowing a few of yours. Like you, I will fight for those I can call precious people. I too will work hard to win by my own strength. I will follow your example to gain people's respect and become Kazekage. Naruto laughed. Wow, I didn't see any of that coming. What about you, team? Whatever, dope, Sasuke said as he looked away. Everything Gaara said had been true and had grown strong because he knew people, and was fighting for them. And now, at his funeral, more people had come to show some amount homage for Naruto than for him. But then he hadn't had time to make lasting relationships with others. He could die at any time because he'd gone to fight his brother. As he thought about it, he realized what he'd been doing. He'd been slowly becoming his brother. Sure, he couldn't massacre his clan, but he'd isolated himself instead of reaching out and attempting to form relations with people who could have helped him stay alive to beat his brother. Finally, Jiraiya stood forward. Giving a sidelong glance at Kakashi, he spoke up. Naruto was a kid of many talents. He was a Gaki, yes, but there was never a Gaki who put his all into everything he did. He mastered the Rasengan in a month, something that took the Yondaime 3 years to master. He was a loudmouth, and may never truly understand how amazing my Aika Make Out series is, but he was one to never back down from his beliefs. I'm not sure whether to be happy or insulted, Naruto said as he listened to Jiraiya contradict himself. I wouldn't worry about it, although he is pretty strong, Sasuke said as he noticed a strange aura that Jiraiya had. He hadn't really noticed it when he saw him, but now it was almost impossible to miss. A few tears slid down Jiraiya's face as he continued to speak. That blonde Gaki, I'll miss him. I'll miss Naruto, my godson. Naruto fell over, while other people in the room gasped. Jiraiya was his godfather? The legendary Toad Sage was the man who was supposed to take Naruto in. What else could that mean? Jiraiya pretended to not notice the commotion that he'd caused. Since he's dead, I guess there's no reason to hide it. Turning to the people in the room, he took a slightly shaky breath. Uzumaki was not Naruto's real surname. It was his mother's surname. His real surname was Namikaze and he was the son of the Yondaime Hokage. If what he'd said before had gotten people's attention, this was too much for some people to handle. Lee tried to yell about how youthful Naruto was to be related to a famous person, but Neji hit him over the head with the bat again so that he'd stay unconscious before he grinned at this revelation. Hinata just blinked, unable to process that information at the moment. She was still caught up on the fact he still had family. Kakashi and Tsunade grinned, giving each other a knowing glance. Sasuke fell back into the room. Naruto, Ino, and Sakura fainted. After waiting a moment to revive Ino and Sakura, Jiraiya quickly explained. As much as Naruto would have gotten respect from people knowing about who his family was, it would have also brought in a great deal of grievances to the village, ones that we could only guess and prepare for. Grievances? Hinata asked, quietly playing with her fingers. She seemed nervous to be speaking to someone of obviously higher rank and power so informally. Yes, grievances. Like the fact that IWA might have attacked us just to kill him for who his father was. After all, it was because of him that we won the Third Shinobi War. Or the fact that other people might have hated him for things he might have done while traveling around. Kakashi probably knows better than anyone else here. He was his student after all. Sakura gasped, turning to her sensei. You were the student of the Kiroi Senko Yellow Flash? The Kiroi Senko, the legend who defeated IWA, was her sensei's sensei? Kakashi smiled as he spoke. That's right. And I had the honor of seeing his Hiraishin no Jutsu in action on more than one occasion. Being punctual was something that he prided himself in. My own personal habits come more from my teammate than from my sensei. But that's a story for another time. Oh, Sakura said, glancing down as she quickly processed the information about her blonde teammate. She'd never really thought about him much before, and it was a different experience to do so. After always chasing after Sasuke, she'd never once realized that her blonde teammate might have that kind of background. Meanwhile, Naruto was going ballistic. My father was the Yondaime. Do you realize what that means? Sasuke shrugged. You tell me. You're the crazy idiot who's waving his hands around like a maniac. Naruto stopped, glaring at Sasuke. You don't have to be like that. Couldn't you be happy that I found out a little bit about my family? I mean, is it so much for you to be kind every now and then? Yes. Sasuke said with no hesitation in his voice as he shuddered. If I show any weakness, the fangirls will swarm me. Naruto blinked, realizing that Sasuke had slightly opened up to him. Is that one of the reasons for how you act? Even though you're dead? Sasuke shrugged, not really wanting to reveal too much right now. One of them. There are a few others, but I'm not going to tell you. Naruto nodded. I understand. Oh, I'm so going to get the rest of the story out of him the first chance I get. This is going in the blackmail folder. Kukukuku. The two of them watched as the people began to slowly walk out of the room, leaving only Jiraiya and Kakashi. The two of them had asked Tsunade to leave for her medical session that she'd started. While she'd obviously been confused, she did as they asked. She never understood why Jiraiya did some of the things he did, but really didn't feel that she could really understand if he tried to explain it. It was complicated. After a couple seconds of silence, Kakashi raised his headband to reveal his Sharingan. He stared directly at Naruto and Sasuke, who were still slightly hidden in the shadows. I know you're there, why don't you step out into the light? Naruto blinked. He thought that they were invisible, was he wrong? Does he mean us? Yes, Naruto, both you and Sasuke have been hanging around for the entire session, so unless you know two other dead people, we're obviously speaking to you. Jiraiya said, sarcasm practically dripping from his voice. Sasuke narrowed his eyes. How can you see us? I thought we were dead? Kakashi said, finishing his sentence. Naruto blinked, suddenly remembering when Kakashi mocked Zabuza during their first battle. Of course you two are dead. There are simply different forms of dead. Naruto scratched his head. Huh, Jiraiya scratched the back of his head. Let's put it simply so he doesn't get confused. You'll have to explain for yourself since I really don't get how you can see ghosts and all that. Kakashi smiled. Alright. Before the Third Shinobi War, I was actually able to see ghosts, and use a special ability others believed to be white chakra. In reality, I was using a technique that didn't require any chakra, but a type of energy called Ryatsu, spirit pressure. However, after I got this Sharingan, my ability became suppressed within the Sharingan. Now, I can't use my ability, and can't see ghosts unless I remove my headband. However, I can still hear them. That's how I'm able to read my book without running into anything. Jiraiya nodded. That makes sense. As for myself, I got my ability to see ghosts shortly after I passed a test that required me to die in order to gain the power to draw in nature chakra. I didn't literally die, but it allowed me to collect chakra from the surrounding area into myself. It's not really my strong point in big battles, but it's really quite handy. Naruto grabbed his head in pain. Ow, too much information. What the heck is Ryatsu again? Jiraiya and Kakashi answered at the same time, in perfect tandem. Your spirit energy. Sasuke blinked. And why are we supposed to know this? Jiraiya gave him a knowing look. You'll find out after you pass over. He then made a waving motion. Byakuya, if you please. Sasuke tilted his head to the side for a second. Who are you, Kanso, Soul Burial? A voice said from behind them. Naruto and Sasuke whipped around to see the person, only to feel light taps on their heads. In a split second, they were slowly enveloped in a glowing light. Neither of them moving, feeling a strange peace coming over them. As they slowly began to fade away, Naruto swore they heard someone say, "We'll meet again on the other side. I look forward to seeing how you'll progress." After they'd been disappeared, Byakuya came out. Jiraiya gave him a light smile. Thanks for the help, Byakuya nodded. After a couple seconds, he asked something that had slightly confused him. Why did Naruto stubborn? He wouldn't want to pass over quietly unless he was sure that all of his precious people were fine. And that would mean that they'd have to die first. Jiraiya said, filling him in. Kakashi nodded. Sasuke would have just stayed around to see who defeats Itachi. It's nothing too big, they just needed to pass over, Byakuya nodded. Very well then. I will ask for a squad to be sent out to find them. It shouldn't be too hard considering the amount of Ryatsu coming off them. I'm almost surprised by the potential they have, Jiraiya chuckled. Don't you believe it? Sasuke may be a genius, but it'll be Naruto you'll need to keep an eye on, Kakashi grinned. He was Konoha's most unpredictable ninja, now he'll just have to be the Suriidi's, Court of Pure Souls, most unpredictable Shinigami. I hope you can keep up, Byakuya sighed. I believe that we can handle one kid. Reaching out, a black butterfly appeared, opening the gate back to the Suriidii. After the door closed, Kakashi turned to Jiraiya. Do you think we should have told him about his Kage Bunshin? Jiraiya shook his head. No, he'll have to find out on his own. Besides, it would be no fun if Naruto's element of surprise was ruined. Both of them grinned as they left the room. Konoha was going to be a boring place without Naruto, but the Suriidii was going to be a very interesting place in the time to come. Dobe, Tiami, two thunderous war cries rang out as the two boys slammed into each other, either one of them wanting to lose any ground. A few of the newer people were watching in awe at their ferocious battle, while a few of the people who'd been there for just a little bit longer preferred to remain as far away from the commotion as possible. After all, these fights were over an object of great worth, and things could get ugly very fast. Said object was a measly loaf of bread that was sitting in the very epicenter of their battleground. They'd crossed over quite some time ago, about a month or so, arriving in a place that the people called the Rakangai, a place where different souls would gather after they died. The Rakangai was divided into 82 districts. The lower the number, the better the environment where you lived. They'd arrived in the 72nd district, a place that, while not that good, was actually a decent place to be. Of course, after you were there for 2 weeks with nothing better to do, you have to get creative to have fun. Thus, watching Naruto and Sasuke fight over who got the bigger half of bread became a common sight for the people there. It kept them strong and alert, and gave the people who didn't need to eat a little entertainment. Naruto swung wildly for Sasuke's face. Sasuke smirked as he countered by dodging inside as guard and slamming his fist into his gut. Naruto stumbled back a few feet before returning to the battle. Once again, Sasuke would dodge and attack when showed an opening. They both knew that Sasuke had a slight edge skill-wise, but Naruto was a monster for punishment. Naruto struck at Sasuke's head with his leg, trying to knock him over. Sasuke almost missed the oncoming strike, and Naruto got a glancing blow to the side of his head despite his last-second dodge. As tried to bring his foot down, he wasn't fast enough to avoid Sasuke's sweeping kick, which made him fall quite ungracefully onto his butt with a loud grunt as the air was forced from his lungs. Naruto and Sasuke gasped for breath, both glaring at the other as they picked themselves up. This was a deciding part of the match. Whoever made the first move could either end the match then and there, or find themselves on the ground in defeat. Neither of them wanted to lose, and yet neither of them could afford to make a wrong move. Lightly sidestepping around in a circular motion, they both took deep breaths. Finally, Naruto stomped his foot on the ground, trying to pull a feint on Sasuke. Surprisingly, Sasuke fell for the feint and charged forward, quickly finding his counterattack ruined by Naruto's sturdy form. Sliding into a deeper stance, and then moving his right leg a little further back to prepare for his next strike, Naruto let Sasuke continue forward till he was directly in front of him till he moved. Swinging his right foot in an arch-like motion, he quickly called out the name of his strike. Konoha Reppu, Leaf Gale. Unable to slow himself down, Sasuke found himself unceremoniously knocked over Naruto's leg as his legs were knocked his own out from underneath him. It was anything but a textbook strike, not at all like the strike Lee had used on Naruto the first time they met. Naruto's small ego had stung a little bit, but no so much when he realized how hard Lee must have trained to learn the taijutsu that he had. That had actually perked his interest, and he eventually began learning a little with Guy before and after Lee's operation, which was why he was able to perform the Konoha Reppu, and had a slightly better taijutsu form. Had he asked Kakashi, who had still been recovering from Itachi's attack, he wouldn't have gotten anywhere. Besides, having a hands-on teacher was a big change for him, necessary for his learning, while not at all helping his sanity. Naruto slowly straightened out, a dirt-covered grin on his face. He walked over to the bread and picked it up. I win, Sasuke grumbled as he slowly pushed himself into a sitting position. Naruto broke the bread in half, tossing the smaller portion to Sasuke. Sasuke mumbled, I guess I'll have to call that a first. You actually managed to knock me over with the last strike. Naruto chuckled, sitting down next to him. Well, you don't have a bigger edge anymore since we can't perform any jutsu here. Remember, no chakra? He waved his arms around as though he were trying to emphasize his point. Sasuke shook his head. How can I not remember when you remind me every 2 hours or so? Anyone else walking by who might have heard their conversation would have thought that the two hated each other from the very cores of their souls. But in their eyes, the semi-playful manner in which they verbally struck each other was almost comical. After realizing that Itachi wasn't going to be dead for a while, Sasuke had finally given up on trying to kill him. He still retained his cold, I really don't care attitude, but he was actually getting along better with Naruto. Death does that to a person, makes them rethink how they live their lives, and try to make them better. Or was it near-death experiences? Naruto, on the other hand, found that there was little to change about himself. Sure, being a hyperactive, loud-mouthed brat never helped him in life, but at least now they wouldn't scorn him about how it was unfit for a shinobi to be so loud. Of course, if a shinobi saw him in his white yukata, they might have screamed in pain. If orange was a horrible color to wear for a shinobi, then white was 20 times worse. After all, at least with the orange he could blend in with a few of his surroundings. White was like painting a bullseye all over again to any enemy he met. A symbol of purity, or not. Sasuke glanced over at, who was happily munching on his bread. Hey Dobe, why do you think we don't have chakra anymore? Naruto glanced over at Sasuke, a thoughtful expression on his face. I really don't know. Maybe that weird stuff Kakashi-sensei and Ero-sennin talked about, what was it called? Sasuke looked away lazily, not at all surprised that Naruto had forgotten for the 20th time that day. Ryatsu? Naruto snapped his fingers with a grin. Yeah. That Ryatsu stuff. Maybe that stuff took the place of our normal chakra. And because we don't know how to feel it, we can't mold it. If we know how to mold this stuff, we could possibly be able to perform jutsus again. Sasuke shook his head, tearing a small portion of his bread off. Dobe, your Ryatsu is your spirit pressure, so it probably ties into the two halves of chakra that we used to mold together. Tapped his head thoughtfully. You mean spiritual and physical energy? Sasuke nodded. Our chakra was divided into two parts, a spiritual part and a physical part. These bodies can't really be considered physical, although they do have a form. We're basically just spiritual entities that are bound together to maintain a human-like form. Naruto shook his head, ripping another portion of the bread off. Then why is it that whenever I feel for this energy, I can't? If we're spiritual entities, shouldn't we be able to feel and mold this energy? Sasuke shrugged. I don't know. However, did hear something from some of the people in town that might be helpful. Naruto put the last piece of his bread into his mouth. Grinning at what Sasuke said, he motioned for him to continue. They said that it was someone called the Shinigami who sent them over here to the Rukongai by performing something called a kanso. Apparently they are people who have a large amount of Ryatsu and are sent over to the physical world to help souls pass over, as well as patrol for hollows. Naruto stopped in mid-chew. After taking that in for a moment, he swallowed quickly. You mean that there are people here who know how to control the Ryatsu? And they might know how to teach us? Sasuke nodded. Yeah. Some of the older people keep talking about how there's supposed to be a squad of them coming through here on patrol later today. They seemed kind of excited. Naruto grinned. Do you think it would be too much to say hello? Sasuke shrugged. I don't know, what do you say we find out? Naruto's grin widened as he began to bolt down the street. Last one there smells like rotten milk. Sasuke blinked as he watched the blonde run off, his mind slowly processing what he'd said. Then, hey! Get back here, Dobe! I'm going to break your legs for this. It's not my fault you're slow. Naruto yelled back as Sasuke began to run after him. Laughed into the wind as they soon came side by side, running through the streets to where the Shinigami were. 5 hours later. You've got to be kidding me. Naruto yelled as he flopped onto his back, rolling in the grass that was just outside the gates of the district. Sasuke glared at Shut Up Dobe. Just because we got here a little early doesn't. Naruto quickly sat up. No, a little early would be an hour before they came. 3 hours is pushing it to the extreme. 5 hours is like freaking torture. He growled again as he violently pushed himself back onto his back. They're as bad as Kakashi-sensei. Sasuke sighed as he sat down beside. Truth be told, he wouldn't sweat when the Shinigami showed up. For all he cared, they could show up at midnight 2 days from now. But with Naruto whining like a little baby for 3 hours, he was beginning to get a little peeved. After all, who in all the elemental countries could stand listening to Naruto whine about how late someone was for 5 hours? A person of even the strongest mind would collapse after listening to him whine like that unless they were some kind of mindless drone or completely deaf person. After another couple of moments, he saw the small group of Shinigami headed their way. At least, he thought they were Shinigami. They were dressed in black kimonos, which would stand out amongst the white yukatas they were wearing. For a second, he was almost tempted to tell Naruto that they were coming just to shut him up. But the prankster side of him, that tiny little kid that had been once locked away, was telling him to let him stay in a funk for a while longer. After all, he wouldn't be on the receiving end of Naruto's fury when he went off. Plus, it would be funny to see how they handled an infuriated. As they approached, Naruto noticed their presence. Realizing that these people were the Shinigami they had been waiting for, an almost evil grin covered his face. As they drew closer, he jumped to his feet. "Where have you guys been?" It was so rewarding to see their shocked expression as they jumped back. While wasn't really angry, he was definitely ticked at how long it had taken for them to get there. Lucky for them, one of the guys was able to recover a little bit faster. "Meh, we saw a small gathering of hollows and went to cleanse them." Naruto and Sasuke knew a little bit about hollows in passing. From what they knew, hollows were souls who were so consumed by a negative emotion that they eventually lost their heart, and had a large hole appear in their chest. They were supposedly monstrous in size, with white masks covering their faces. The masks were supposed to protect their dark intentions from damage. It was the Shinigami's job to cleanse them for the souls they had consumed while they were hollows. Their own souls were supposed to be cleansed from the mistakes made as a hollow, although they were still judged on their past mistakes. Naruto scratched his head, trying not to growl. It was a good excuse, and there was really nothing for him to say anything since they had come up with something reasonable enough to placate him for now. Of course, if they said one wrong thing, he planned on knocking them down. Then the man who had first spoken just had to open his mouth. "Of course, afterwards, we stopped along the way to have a nice large dinner in the 53rd district. That took about an hour of our time, and we ended about a half hour ago, so don't sweat it, shorty." There was a long pause. A dark, chilling aura slowly swept over the poor Shinigami. A few of them stepped back in fear from the amount of spirit pressure that was suddenly being emitted by Naruto. After a second, he glared at the Shinigami. "Shorty?" Sasuke winced. It was time to unleash the fury. With a loud roar, Naruto tackled the poor man to the ground. The other Shinigami moved out of the way as he began to wrestle with the man, trying to get the upper hand. Realizing that he couldn't fight fair, Naruto did everything and anything that he could: bite, kick, scratch, punch. Needless to say, the guy didn't seem very pleased by it, and soon began to employ a few of the same tactics against Naruto. The Shinigami watched in amazement as the two of them continued to wrestle each other. For a brief second, they thought that their friend would win as he got on top to pin him, until Naruto used his short size to his advantage to get his feet planted into his stomach and launched him over his head. He landed with an undignified gasp as the air was knocked out of him. Panting lightly, Naruto slowly stood up. Watching his new adversary was standing as well, albeit less winded than was. Naruto grinned. "So, ready for more?" The man chuckled. "Sure, kid." "Say, what's your name?" Grinned, jabbing a thumb at his chest. "Uzumaki Naruto." The man blinked. "Wait, are you sure you're not Namake's Naruto?" Naruto stopped grinning. The sudden memory of his real heritage came back to him, and he realized that all he knew was his dad's nickname. He didn't even remember what the guy's last name was. "Oh, I'm not sure." "Why do you ask?" The man pulled out a piece of paper. "We were ordered by Byakuya Taicho to retrieve two powerful souls who had recently been sent to the Rakangai. They are known by the names Namake's Naruto and Uchiha Sasuke." Sasuke stepped forward. "I guess you found us then." The man blinked. "Uchiha Sasuke?" Sasuke nodded, making the man grin. "Well, that makes our job all the more easier. How about we wait here for the night? It's getting pretty dark out, and most hollows prefer the night time to attack. We'll explain a few things before we go to the Siriidai." Naruto grinned. "Will you teach us something cool?" The man shrugged. "I guess so. We weren't instructed to do so, but it'll be something to do to pass the time. Come on, let's go back inside." As they began to walk back into the district, Sasuke stopped. "Hey, wait a minute." The guy stopped, glancing back at Sasuke's criticizing face. "What's your name?" The man grinned. "I am the third seat in the 13th division of the Jusengodiai, 13 Shinigami Court Divisions, Shiba Kaiyan." Later, holy, I know, he didn't, but he did. Kaiyan could barely hear the idle chatter of his squad as his ears were still ringing. The reason being that he'd been forcefully sent into a wall. After shaking his head, he began to realize that Naruto was shouting something. Trying to read his lips was pointless as the boy kept on moving around, and wouldn't hold still. Getting frustrated, he grabbed A's shoulders. "Calm down. Now I want you to repeat what you said slowly." Naruto gulped. "I said I'm sorry. I don't know what happened. I just pushed everything I could into the technique, and it sort of..." Kaiyan held up a hand. "It's alright, it's my fault. I should have told you to regulate your Ryatsu output. I mean, I didn't realize that you'd have enough Ryatsu to do this with the first Hado, destruction spells." This being that he'd forced Kaiyan completely through a wall. It was his own fault for volunteering to act as the test dummy for the boys' practice. He thought that it would have taken a moment or two, trying to feel the flow of their Ryatsu, and then forming it with the Hado's chant. Of course, the moment Naruto felt his Ryatsu, he stood up and shouted the Hado. No chant or anything like that, just the name of the Hado. And that's how he found himself thrown through a wall. Working out the kinks in his neck, he grinned at the only reason you need control is so that you can learn the Bakudo, binding spell. 'Cause if you don't you'll have a hard time passing the academy. Naruto suddenly had a look of terror on his face. We have to go back to an academy? Kaien tilted his head to the side as he gazed curiously at the blonde. Yes? How else did you expect to become Shinigami? If we just let anyone go out, we wouldn't have anyone left as they'd all be dead. Plus, most people don't have your natural talent. He was surprised by the smile that suddenly gave him. It was one that seemed to be made from embarrassment and pride. It was like he had somehow fed a dying flame, and its light was returning. He couldn't help but feel happy for the kid as well. Sasuke grumbled as he stood up. Hey Dobe, come here. Naruto smiled as he skipped over towards Sasuke, not realizing what Sasuke was planning. What do you want? Hado 1, show! Sasuke yelled, punching his fist at Naruto. Naruto's eyes widened as he suddenly found himself flying backwards at a high speed. Unlike Kaien, he didn't have a nice, hard wall to stop him. He soon found himself tumbling through the grass a ways away. When he glanced up, he saw Sasuke looking smugly at him. Team, what? I didn't get a turn, and I didn't want to further injure Kaien-san. I wanted to see how much damage I could do if I forced all my Ryatsu into my first Hado. Besides, you can get injured all you want since you're not as cool as we are. Sasuke placed a hand on a confused Kaien's shoulder and gave his trademark smirk. I'm going to kill you! Naruto roared as he quickly rushed back into the home, tackling Sasuke. Kaien and his team watched the two of them kicking up a large dust cloud. It was quite humorous to see two talented boys going at each other's throats like little kids. It was more than obvious that they hadn't been dead for long by their behavior, but a few of the members couldn't help but feel a little weak. Sure, Kaien had totally left himself open to that hit, but had it been them, they doubted they would have moved him more than a foot or so away from themselves. Things would be quite interesting with these two around. After another moment, they realized that neither of them appeared to be winning their little fight. Kaien sighed, if you two don't stop this foolish fighting right now, I'm going to leave you here tomorrow. As quickly as it had started, the fight stopped, both Naruto and Sasuke sitting cross-legged with semi-innocent looks on their faces. After all, it was more fun for them than it was dangerous. As they continued to smile at them, they began to feel a sudden weakness start to overcome them. Within a moment they were on the floor, sleeping soundly. Kaien glanced at the two of them, chuckling a little as he covered them with a blanket. Naruto and Sasuke, huh? I do believe that the Siriidii is going to be quite interesting with them around. He glanced back at his squad. Alright, we're going to rest for the night, understand? One of the members glanced at the large wall. Kaien Dano, what should we do about the wall? Kaien shrugged. Just say that a hollow tried to get in and we stopped it. That's the usual BS we use, right? After thinking it over, and deciding that they were still pretty tired, they walked to their respective rooms to sleep. Kaien just grinned. I can't wait till they get their power tamed. It'll be a sight to see them walking around as captains. Later that night, Naruto rolled over on his sleeping mat, listening to the soft snores of the other people around him. But for some reason, he himself couldn't get back to sleep. The silence was giving him a lot of time to think, and some things had come up. For one, what would he do now? He was becoming a Shinigami after all his life wanting to be a shinobi. And yet, it felt good to be around people who didn't hate him. It was like going from an environment you hated to do something you loved, to going to an environment you loved to do something you had no clue about. So confusing, and it brought no comfort through the night. After a couple seconds he sat up. There was something that was bothering him more than those thoughts. Something he actually had avoided thinking about since he'd arrived in the Rukongai. He slowly stood up, walking over to the hole in the wall. As he stood there, staring at the moon and the stars in the night sky, the final problem he'd been wrestling with returned. What do I do since I can't become Hokage? He'd remembered how he'd been so vocal about it, becoming the strongest Hokage ever to get the respect of the villagers. But here, there wasn't a Hokage or any other kind of Kage if he thought about it. And he wasn't going to stop becoming a Shinigami just because of that. It was just something to think about. What now? How do I live my second life? Is this really what I want? It is. Naruto jumped, glancing around. Seeing no one else awake, he gazed out into the surrounding forest, trying to see who might have spoken. Hello? Protect them, your precious people. Who's there? Show yourself. Whispered, trying not to awaken anyone as he raised his voice to a level that anyone outside could hear. Protect them, protect them, protect them. After a couple seconds, the strange voice began to fade away. Naruto glanced around, realizing that he was alone. Groaning, he rubbed his head. I must be crazy, hearing voices, ha. Turning around, he slowly slid back onto his mat. This time, his mind was strangely clear, and soon he was fast asleep, none the wiser about what had just transpired. Next day, Naruto's eyes were wide as he stared at their new surroundings. They'd long left the Rukongai, and entered the Siriidii. It was nothing like he'd expected it to be. He really wasn't sure what it was supposed to look like, but it was far beyond anything he'd expected. People were walking around, conversing with each other, training each other, and just simply walking around. Kaien noticed the sudden excited look on Naruto's face, and couldn't help but grin. It was infectious. Which couldn't be said about Sasuke and his cloud of gloom. He too had the same kind of curiosity, but there wasn't any active enthusiasm. He just had something too akin to lust in his eyes for a moment as he noticed some of the different zanpakutos that people were using in their sparring matches. After a couple seconds, he began to clutch his head, as if desperately trying to suppress some painful memories. Kyan decided to ask him about what he'd been thinking about much later. It looked like he was trying to forget something really painful. Alright, you guys, go ahead to our division. I want to see a report on Yukitake Taicho's desk before he got back. Dismissed. Kyan yelled, watching his squad run ahead to their division, cheerful smiles on their faces. Kyan grinned as he turned back to Naruto and Sasuke. Alright you guys, we'll be going from division to let you get a feel for how things run around here. You'll have to go through our academy course for the next 10 years before you are accepted to test yourself into your very own division. While you're there, you'll learn Kido, Demon Path, Hakuta, hand-to-hand combat, Ho-Ho, step method, pure speed, and finally Zanjutsu, swordsmanship. Naruto scratched his head. I didn't catch half the stuff you said, but that last one sounded really cool, Kyan chuckled. Don't worry, they'll cover everything more than once, so you won't have to forget. You'll do great, Naruto smiled. Thanks Kyan-san. Sasuke frowned as he continued to look away. It was weird, how he was unable to make friends as easily as was, and yet at the same time, he wanted to be Kyan's friend. He'd constantly avoided friendships because he was scared that he would become attached to that person, and be unable to kill them when the time came. But since he no longer had the Sharingan, did he really need that old habit? He was going to have to think long and hard on this. After a moment, Kyan stopped in front of a fairly large building. He stopped. This is the 13th Division, led by the captain Yukitake Jeshiro. Our vice captain died recently, so we're trying to figure out who's going to become his replacement. Kyan grinned. I'm one of those who is most likely to become it. I'm not sure if I'm qualified, but Yukitake has been really insistent about this. Oh hey Yukitake Taicho. I'm just introducing a newbie around before I take him to the Sotecho. Main General, a white-haired man walked towards them, a warm smile crossed his face. Ah, good to see you Kyan-san. How has your training been going recently? Kyan chuckled nervously. Well, I'm getting it in whenever I'm not out patrolling the Rukongai. Yukitake nodded. That's good to hear Kyan. I'm sure that you'll make a fine vice-captain for me. And who are these two with you? Kyan grinned again. These are Uchiha Sasuke, the broody one, and Namikaze Naruto, the short blonde kid. I'm not short. Naruto yelled while Yukitake simply laughed. Naruto pouted. It's not funny. Yukitake just shook his head and shook both their hands. His eyes flickered in surprise by the amount of Ryatsu these fresh souls had in comparison to some of the others he'd felt. He laughed lightly. Well, I must say that it's good to see we have some fresh talent preparing to join our ranks. Good luck to the both of you. Naruto and Sasuke both waved back at him as Kyan led them on in their tour of the Suriidai. The next stop was the 12th Division. Needless to say, found that Naruto's eyes were flickering around as he looked at all the different test tube things in the science lab, feeling a small amount of disgust as he did so. Sasuke looked curious, but had a similar feeling when Naruto told him that he could have easily become part of something similar by joining Orochimaru. After that, when he looked at them, he couldn't help but see himself in all of the tubes. It was disgusting. Captain of the 12th Division, Kuratsuchi Mayuri. Vice Captain is his daughter, Kuratsuchi Nimyu. They aren't here right now, so let's move along, Kyan said as he quickly hustled the two boys out of the division, obviously discomforted by being in the division. Naruto was rather pleased to find that the next division was nothing like the 12th. This is the haven for all fighters, brawlers, and other such people, the 11th Division. Captain, Zaraki Kenpachi. Vice Captain, Kusajishi Ichiru. Kenpachi is clinically insane, but he and a lot of the 11th Division are out hollow hunting, so we shouldn't have to worry about meeting him yet. As they were about to leave, a small pink-haired blur suddenly came flying through the corridors and knocked Naruto to the floor. Oh hail Minna! Hello everyone, Naruto grunted as he slowly picked himself up. Hi, Kyan sighed. This is Yachira Fukatecho. She usually remembers people better by giving them nicknames. Yachira nodded. After a moment of looking around, she spotted Sasuke. She tugged on Naruto's yukata. Hey Kuroi-chan, what's wrong with chicken but haired dude? Sasuke blinked as he realized that she was talking about him. Before he could say anything, Naruto chuckled. No Yachira-chan, it's Kuroi-kun. As for chicken but haired dude, no one knows what's wrong with him. Kyan had to physically restrain Sasuke from killing Naruto and Yachiro as they bid farewell to each other and moved on to the next division. The 10th Division was different to say the least. Naruto didn't bother restraining his laughter as he saw a grumbling Hitsugaya Toshiro surrounded by large piles of paperwork. It reminded him so much of how he would find Sarutobi whenever he'd try and visit him. The vice captain was absent, so after a while they left to go to the next division. Naruto was quite happy to find another person who didn't appreciate people making fun of his size. 9th Division was even more contrast to the first divisions he'd been to. There was a silent, tense atmosphere. Everyone was either training by themselves, or sparring with each other, but there wasn't any energy in it. Naruto silently prayed to Kami that he wasn't put in this division. He didn't think that he could handle having to be silent all the time. Plus the captain, Kenaim Tosin, was way too quiet. 8th Division was a happy contrast to all the other divisions they'd been to. As they walked in, they were greeted by the sight of Isi Nanao bashing Kuraka Shunsui into the ground with a book, yelling about how he was a captain and needed to act as such. It was kind of funny to see someone else on the receiving end of a woman's wrath, but Naruto couldn't help but feel sympathetic for the man. He was probably too old to break his habits, and if Nanao didn't stop beating him, he was going to have serious brain damage. Sasuke just gave himself a silent reminder not to tick girls off. 7th was like 9th Division all over again. The captain, Kamamura Sajin, wore huge armor and a helmet, making him look like a giant oversized samurai, and reeked of strictness. The whole division was filled with the same feeling as they bid him farewell. As they left, they also met the vice captain, Iba Tetsuziman. He wore sunglasses and acted really weird. Sasuke resisted the urge to snort when he heard how many curse words he could put into a sentence. 6th was a shocker, silence again. Although, unlike the other silent divisions, the captain, Kichiki Byakuya, actually didn't seem that bad of a guy. A little strict, but overall nice. Naruto swore he'd heard the guy's name before, but couldn't place his finger on it. Sasuke just laughed at the dobe's incompetence. This was obviously the guy who'd sent them here in the first place, but he wasn't going to tell him that. Better to let him figure it out for himself. 5th was boring. The captain was an okay enough guy, but as they gave a quick greeting, Naruto couldn't help but feel a weird feeling whenever the two of them locked their gazes. From that glance, he could feel that the man seemed to be hiding something. Aizen Sosuke, he'd keep his eyes on him. Even stranger was the vice captain, someone named Ikamaru Jin. He had this constant smile on his face, and his eyes didn't look like they were going to open anytime soon. Unlike Aizen, Naruto clearly felt an immediate dislike for the man, but just pretended to ignore him as they moved on. Sasuke just gave the man a curious look before walking off. It would take too much time to try and understand why Naruto didn't like this guy even if he felt the same way. Now they headed off to the 4th Division, to which Naruto smacked his head. Was every division silent? He was pleased to meet the captain, Uno Hanaretsu, and the vice captain Kotetsu Aising. Both of them seemed like really nice people, and even Sasuke couldn't help but politely bow before leaving. 3rd Division was confusing, seeing as there wasn't a captain or a vice captain around. Naruto and Sasuke both tried to get Kaien to tell them what had happened, but he told them he didn't know himself. All he knew was that one of the former captains had gone insane, and had done something to several of the other captains and vice captains. It was too vague, but enough to satisfy them for the time being. 2nd Division was next, and both the boys couldn't help but palm their faces. The vice captain was a royally fat pig named Omida Marekio. Kaien had explained that 2nd Division specialized in assassination and hakuda, and the only one of those he could see this guy being able to perform was hakuda if he could see his opponent from behind his bulk. Sasuke took notice of how he held his sword, noticing that he seemed inclined to keep his hand off it most of the time he talked with them, while other Shinigami kept their hands on it when they spoke. For someone of 2nd Division to not be on guard while meeting new people showed a giant lack of common sense. When they moved further in the division, they soon entered a room with a futon laid out in the middle of it, with a short woman still cross-legged in deep meditation. She was wearing her standard Shinigami captain's uniform. Her navy blue hair is worn short with 2 long braids covered in cloth. She had a calm and cool aura about her, one that tested both Naruto and Sasuke's nerves as they made certain to look her in the eyes. For some reason, they were certain that if they looked anywhere else their lives would be in jeopardy. After bowing out, they finally reached their long-awaited destination, the 1st Division, where the Soteicho Yamamoto Genryusai Shigakuni was waiting for them. His vice captain was away, so his third seat, Sasuke Chojiro, who led them in front of the general and creator of the 13 divisions in the Seirei. Ah, Namikaze Naruto and Uchiha Sasuke, I presume? The old man said in a gruff, yet kind manner. Naruto had to hand it to him. He could tell that the old man was really strong, and to keep it like that at such an old age was an impressive feat. It reminded him of the Sandaime Hokage while he was still alive. Sasuke's entire attitude seemed to completely change in this guy's presence. It was like he was suddenly respectful of the authority that this old man held. He wasn't sure why this change suddenly came over him, but it was kind of like looking at a person who was a combination of Orochimaru and Kakashi, noble, yet ruthless. It is a pleasure to meet you, Yamamoto Soteicho. Naruto grinned. Yeah, what he said. But could you please call me Uzumaki? It feels so weird being called Namikaze, even if it is my real last name. Yamamoto chuckled. I do believe that it won't be a problem. It is a pleasure to meet the both of you as well. Now I'm sure you are both aware of Naruto's situation as the holder of the Kyuubi no Yoko, are you not? Naruto winced, obviously not really ready to share that kind of information with the general public. Sasuke glanced at Naruto, not sure whether he was surprised or relieved. After all, it would explain how Naruto suddenly became so strong during their fight in the Valley of the End. But then, like most people, he thought that the Kyuubi had been killed by the Yondaime. Yamamoto noticed the strange change in both their attitudes. I'm sorry, Naruto. I didn't realize that the Sandaime hadn't told anyone of the truth. I will have to speak with him as soon as I can. Noticing both their confused looks, he quickly explained. I was the one who was summoned to pull the soul of the Kyuubi, as well as Orochimaru's arms, out of them. Your yondaime is currently sealed away in level 8 until he's finished recovering from being in contact with Kyuubi's soul. On the other hand, your sandaime should be coming out of level 2 soon. It took a lot less out of me to take 2 arms than it was to take a whole soul, a demon's soul no less. Naruto nodded, understanding a little better. Sasuke was probably more confused than he'd ever been in his life, and Kaien was staring at with something akin to awe. He'd heard of the Kyuubi, everyone in the Siridae had heard of him. However, by the disturbed looks on their faces, he was sure that they didn't know its entire history. It would be quite funny to see their reactions when they heard it. Yamamoto continued. Now let's discuss your new duties. You both are quite lucky, considering your previous circumstances should have mutated both of your souls into hollows. But, even if by mere luck, both of your souls appear to have come out more or less unharmed. However, that is no reason for either of you to skip our 10-year course in the Shinigami Academy. Naruto groaned as he remembered what Kaien had told them as they'd been coming to the first division. He'd failed the Shinobi Academy 3 times while he was alive. How was the Shinigami Academy supposed to be different? Sasuke seemed to share his resentment as he scowled at Yamamoto. He was an Uchiha, one who could be considered the closest thing to royalty in the elemental. Sasuke groaned inwardly and shook his head. He wasn't in the elemental countries anymore, and he didn't have the Sharingan or his clan to back him up. In this world, he was as good as worthless. Sure, he had Ryatsu, but he really didn't have the skill to use it at the moment. And with no clan history in this place, he would be at around the same level as would be, nothing more than a common person. But to see things from his eyes might be a change in things. Maybe even show him how it was that had become powerful, Kyuubi or no Kyuubi. You will find that during this process, you will learn all kinds of Kido, Hakuda. Naruto raised his hand. Kaien-san already told us all the things that would be covered in the academy. Kaien suddenly stood ramrod straight. No one interrupted the Sotecho when he was telling them anything, period. He gave Yamamoto an apologetic glance as he turned to lightly glare at him. Yamamoto just smiled. I see, then that means that I'll have less to discuss to you. Kaien let out a small sigh of relief. They weren't going to be in trouble. That was the last thing he needed, seeing as he didn't have many chances to become a vice captain. Plus, if he didn't get the position, he'd probably get sent out to the real world again, meaning less time with his wife. And that was something he really didn't want. Yamamoto chuckled once again. Uzumaki, Uchiha, let it be known that I expect you two to pass this course with flying colors. I shall see you in 10 years' time. Good day and good luck. Dorm rooms. Okay, you mean to tell me that I'll be living with someone who I've probably never met before, and I'll have to get along with him for the next 10 years? Who chose the room setting? Naruto said in a deadpan tone. While he wasn't against meeting new people, he really wanted to be with someone he knew, and since most of the people he knew were still alive, other than Sasuke, there wasn't much chance of that happening. Kaien chuckled. Don't worry, Nanao chose the room setting so that they wouldn't have people of similar genders in the same room. Now, if it was Yuichiro Fukutecho that picked the lots, it would all be pure luck who you got. Don't worry, it won't be as bad as you think it'll be. Naruto scoffed. Easy for you to say, you're already out of the academy and in the field. I'm not saying that I won't survive, just that it'll be a lot harder to make new friends here, I'm sure of it. By the way, thanks for wasting a whole day with me and Sasuke. It was really fun. Kaien chuckled. Well, I must say, if you're worried about making friends, don't. I mean, you probably already made a friend today, even if you didn't know it. Naruto looked up at Kaien. Would you consider us friends? Kaien blinked. Then, after a couple of seconds, he grinned. Sure, we're friends. Naruto grinned. Then you'd better promise me that the next time I see you, you're the vice captain of the 13th division, and show me a few more totally awesome techniques that you've learned. Kaien nodded. Hey, tell you what. If you can get good grades for the next 5 years, I'll teach you the basics of Shuinpa, Flash Step. Naruto blinked. Shuinpa? What's that? Kaien grinned. It's a technique that only vice captains and captains are supposed to know. It's basically a much faster version of the ho-ho. I shouldn't teach it to you, but then I'm sure that it's not too much trouble to give a friend a few pointers on a technique he's already learning. Naruto's mouth hung open, dumbfounded. He couldn't tell what he was feeling. It was something that he hadn't felt in a long time. Even with his other senseis, he hadn't felt like this. Kaien was truly a friend. So, he did the only thing that he felt would adequately express his feelings. He tackle-hugged Kaien, knocking the unsuspecting man onto his back. Kaien just patted him on the back, not really understanding how much he'd impacted the young boy's life. After a couple of moments, got up, wiping away a few tears that were streaming down his face as he accepted the key to his dorm. After Kaien disappeared around the corner, Naruto took a deep breath. He turned back to his room and stared at the door. Room 132. The room that would be the start of his future life, and maybe even his ascension to a better place. Grinning in a feral manner, he quickly unlocked the door and walked into the room. As he stepped into the room, he froze, feeling a sudden dread and elation fill him. For there, sitting on the other side of the room, was Uchiha Sasuke. For a moment, there was a long silence, neither of them wanting to say anything as they locked eyes. Then, finally, Sasuke spoke up. I see we're roommates. Naruto slowly nodded. Yep, I guess we are. A pause. Then, I already called the far side of the room, Sasuke said, sounding like he'd somehow won the lottery. Naruto just smirked. Oh really? What gave you that right? You were late, and I got here first. So I get the far side. Oh no you don't. We're going to settle this like men, Naruto yelled, holding his fist out in front of himself. You want to go? Sasuke asked, getting to his feet and getting into a similar position as. Bring it! Naruto yelled as they began to shake their fists. Jan Ken Poi! Paper, rock, scissors. Naruto threw out rock, while Sasuke threw out paper. Look that way! Sasuke yelled, pointing up. Naruto quickly looked down, causing them to go back to their game. They continued this for the rest of the night, either of them gaining ground till Sasuke finally managed to win, and settled the matter. Naruto pouted for a while before his mind began to whirl once again. He may have been in a new environment, but that didn't mean that he was giving up old habits. Oh no, tomorrow, people would have to watch what they did, because if he caught them, they would be on the receiving end of the world-famous prankster Prince. Naruto's grin widened as he began to fall asleep. Yep, this life is going to be totally awesome, he muttered as he finally began to slip away into a blissful sleep. When Naruto and Sasuke first entered the academy, either of them were prepared for what they would go through. In all essence, it was almost exactly like the Shinobi Academy. This meant that Sasuke was able to follow the work quite easily, whereas Naruto found himself struggling through the written materials. What could he say? He just couldn't retain any of the information from those classes. Surprisingly, they were both at the top of their practical classes where they actually preformed the techniques that were being discussed in the other classes. This was a relief for Naruto, because it meant that he didn't have to worry about whether or not he should mold his Ryatsu one way or another. He just had to get a good enough result to pass. And that was something that he found he was quite good at. As time went on, throughout the entire academy, word was beginning to spread about a new prodigy unlike anyone they'd ever seen. A guy who the girls adored, and the guys envied. He was strong and smart, yet playful and, unknowingly, flirtatious. He made things further difficult for himself as he tried time and time again to avoid or reject their approaches, despite the fact that he told them he honestly wasn't playing hard to get. This was the unfortunate second life of Uchiha Sasuke. Just like in the living world, Sasuke tried to avoid the girls' affections to better study his work. However, he wanted to try a different version of Naruto's childlike behaviors to try and see if they would avoid him like they did Naruto in the living world. Unfortunately, the modifications were too good, and his childlike behaviors were seen more as cute rather than appalling. And he was not going to give in to Naruto's suggestions of publicly saying that he was gay, or that he already had a girlfriend. He just didn't want to lie to them one way or another, and it would be quite humiliating to even think of the first. He couldn't help the fact that girls seemed to flock to him wherever he went, even he didn't know how he did it. He soon found that many of the guys respected him for being able to hold his own against the hordes of girls that attempted to subdue him. After a while, he finally became friends with two guys who were in their 5th year, Ikaku and Yumichika. They believed that they were set for the 11th division, and were more than happy to fight with Sasuke during Hakuda and Zanjutsu, seeing as everyone, other than Naruto, was scared to fight against the prodigy. On the other hand, Naruto had his own little following of girls slowly chasing him. However, unlike in the living world, he acted a little more mature around the women, which seemed to earn him more admirers. He even was able to take a few of the girls on dates. This meant that the girls didn't have to fight each other for his affections, and he was able to have a lot of fun dates with a lot of different S. Some guys would say that he was a player, but he would constantly deny it as it wasn't true in the slightest. However, if he were called a flirt now, how was he to deny that? After all, it was quite true, and even the girls would tell him that on their dates. Naruto also found that he had a gift for listening to people. This usually meant that if the girls had any troubles, they could be found talking to Naruto. Just talking usually seemed to help them get over whatever it was and made many of the other guys jealous when they'd hug him or give him a kiss on the cheek before running off. Sasuke didn't really care when they were outside of their room, but if one listened closely, they could hear both Naruto and Sasuke laughing at the memory of the guys' faces before they went to bed. Some of the other guys soon began to swarm Naruto, trying to understand how he could get so many girls to go out with him, while they would just get a rejection for even looking at them. When some of the less bold guys would ask them what he said, they would just laugh and tell them that he knew stuff that was so advanced that some captains didn't know it. In reality, he just shrugged and said, "You know guys, it's just what I do." He also became friends with a few other people, Hanataro and a guy named Sora being just a few he could name. Hanataro quickly becoming someone who he could rely on, as he was obviously zoned to be in 4th division. Whenever he and Sasuke would fight, Hanataro would be on standby, waiting for it to end so that he could practice his medical Kido on them. In return, Naruto was trying to help him with Hakuda so that he wouldn't be defenseless against the hollow should some blockhead from the 11th division decided that helping guard him wasn't as fun as cleansing hollows and deserted him. He'd heard way too many stories to just let his friend go into a fight without any way of fighting back. Currently, they'd gotten through the first 2 years of the academy without too much trouble other than the trouble that Naruto would bring on himself by pulling many pranks. Having all those girls meant that he heard about a lot of guys who would pick on them for this and that, as well as being able to listen to all the local gossip to find out other things. Once, he'd facepalmed as he realized that most women would be the worst kind of spy network ever with the way they openly shared their secrets. The people he heard about would eventually find themselves in very peculiar positions. One guy even had to come into class with a pink yukata that had light blue butterflies all over it. When asked why he was wearing such a peculiar outfit, he told the teacher that all of his clothes were in that condition, and he swore that it wasn't a practical joke he was trying to pull on him. He then had to sit through the entire class like that, with most of the guys trying to console him, while the girls talked about how pretty he looked. He was both ashamed and embarrassed. While he'd sworn to take revenge on the person who did it, no one ever figured out how Naruto was able to do it. Of course, that was a prank that was named the Level 1 punishment. This usually happened because the person said a rude comment to one of the girls, or to an 11th division hopeful who picked on a 4th division hopeful. However, should there be something of a higher offense, meaning that they take it too far, they find themselves faced with a Level 2 punishment. And when that happened, everyone knew what was happening as many explosions went off from around the person's room. It was actually very simple. By molding his ryatsu into thin little strings all around the person's room using bakudo, he then sent different hados through the string and knocked on the door. When the person walked out, they tripped over the strings and found themselves having to rebound away from all kinds of different kido as the oncoming destruction ensued. No one got away unharmed unless Naruto was using it for training. Then he wouldn't take the time for the complex hados, and would use most of the simpler ones. It was only because he practiced it that he was ever implied into the different destructions that happened to several different people. Sasuke had raised an eyebrow at this technique. To think that Naruto would waste so much ryatsu just to set up a trap that didn't even have a high chance of actually hitting confused him for a while until he realized that the trap was simply for fun, rather than for battle. And considering the fact that it didn't endanger anyone, he figured he could live with it. After all, it wouldn't do to destroy them before their careers, and the real danger began. As time had gone on, due to how boring things had been for the two of them, they'd eventually come up with a rather fun game to play afterwards. They called it stealth. By taking many everyday things they used to do while they were alive, they'd eventually created a game where the two of them could hone their skills in speed, stealth, and hakuda. Since they didn't have their zanpakutos yet, they decided to make it a rule that they could only use hakuda. The point of the game was to take the other person's life, which was a red slip of paper located on the person's back. Once the tag was taken, they were out or dead, whichever way you wanted to see it. After a while, they began to get a little bored of the game seeing as they couldn't play it by themselves forever. As such, they began to look throughout their classmates, and create their own teams to try and defeat each other. That's when the games got really interesting as you had to watch you back more often than in a one-on-one fight. Naruto glanced around. He knew that with his group of 18 people, including himself, he didn't have nearly as many people as Sasuke did. Plus, with Ikaku and Yamachika, his group was going to have a hard time. Closing his eyes, he thought up a quick plan that might actually work. His team sat back, watching as Naruto surveyed the area. Most of the people in his group were people who'd played the game on more than one occasion, and understood how Naruto did things, with absolutely no forethought. It was actually more fun to fight on Naruto's side, even if Sasuke's was always more organized and planned out than theirs. After all, when else would your captain trust you enough to let you do whatever you feel like to get the job done? Naruto slowly turned to his group. Alright, here's what we're going to do. We're going to split into two groups. Sora and I will be the team leaders, with at least one medic one each team. I'll take them down to the lower portion of the valley to draw Sasuke and his team into a trap. Sora, you'd better make sure to get them before they hit us too hard. Sora grinned. Don't worry. I'll make sure that they don't even know what hit them. Come on, guys. He jumped off into the trees, half the team quickly following him. Naruto chuckled. Sora was very much like he was, only with dark red hair, and more skill in Kido than he had. He looked to be around 15 years old, but when Naruto had asked, he told him he was closer to 100 years old. Scary. Naruto turned back to his group. Alright, here's what we're going to do. We're going to move in a standard 3-line formation. I'll take center as it's the best place for me to get everywhere at once to help you guys. Hanataro, I want you behind me. No need to give them a clear target, nay? Everyone else, form up. The 8 other people in his group scrambled forward, quickly forming the formation. Naruto's plan only gave them one shot at hitting the other team hard, and if the second group didn't do their job, they weren't going to last. Sasuke had made sure that he had plenty of members who were more than able to take a hit and dish it right back out, but Naruto wasn't their leader for nothing. He knew Sasuke better than anyone else, as well as what he would do if he were caught in a movement like this. So as they moved, he quickly thought out what they would do once they had both Sasuke and his team in sight. After only a couple of moments, they found themselves in the clearing. Naruto stopped, glancing in all directions. He couldn't see through the dense foliage, but he was sure that Sasuke was around somewhere. Hanataro, can you tell where they are at? Naruto asked, his eyes darting about as he tried to figure out where they were. Hanataro glanced around. I think that way? He said, pointing to the left. Naruto closed his eyes and concentrated, trying to feel in that direction. As he did, an animalistic grin suddenly began to cross his face. Let the games begin. Snapping his eyes open, he quickly shouted, "Scatter!" The moment he issued the command, his group quickly began to rush about. In the same moment, members of Sasuke's group began to fall out of the trees. They quickly realized that their ambush had failed, and they would have to fight them. For the 11th member hopefuls, it was the perfect for them, as it was a chance for them to crush their competition. Take down anyone who gets in your way, Naruto yelled as he aimed himself at one of the guys. He ducked under a wild swing and slammed his right hand into his stomach. Reaching out, he quickly yanked the tag off the guy's back. He then wrapped his right leg around the guy's and slammed him forward. He never had a chance as he was slammed onto his back. Naruto grinned as he watched his group fight. They were actually doing fairly well, even Hanataro was managing to throw some of them around. He laughed lightly as he quickly slammed into another guy's back, ripping his tag off. This was way too easy. It was too easy. Naruto stopped as he realized that things were going too smoothly for things to really be going right. After all, Yumachika usually fought against Hanataro to prove that the clumsy teen wasn't as pretty as he was. And Sasuke always made sure that he fought either Naruto or Sora. Naruto whirled around, realization on his face. Seeing that his team was handling the group quite well, he grimaced. Leave it to Sasuke to think of the hardest decisions for him to make. Closing his eyes, he tried to figure out how he could handle the situation. He could abandon his group, heading off to help Sora's group, or he could finish up here, and hope that Sora could hold his own. His eyes snapped open. He'd left Sora in charge because he knew that he could hold his own. So if he got caught by Sasuke, he'd do everything he could to take him down. With a loud battle cry, Naruto slammed into another member of the ambush team. Their numbers were quickly going down, and Naruto couldn't help but laugh again as he fought. It was fun, simple as that. As they finished up the last of the members, someone began a slow, sarcastic clapping. Bravo, I'm surprised you handled this as well as you did. Naruto craned his neck around, a grin still plastered on his face. So what's Sasuke? I've always had a team that can fight well together, Sasuke chuckled. That you may, but you seem to be missing a few members. Care to enlighten us? Naruto just shrugged. You know how I do things, even I don't know how things are going to work out, Sasuke sighed. Still as unpredictable as ever, Naruto grinned. You bet I am. Come on guys, let's go. Spike-shaped formation, Naruto's team quickly formed around him, forming a large V with Naruto as the point. Sasuke narrowed his eyes as they began their charge. Just as he was about to issue his own command, another voice rang out. The cavalry has arrived. Sasuke's eyes widened as Sora and the rest of the group suddenly slammed into the side of his team. At the same moment, Naruto and his team hit the front of his group, tearing through towards Sora's group. Within moments, every one of his members had their tags ripped off besides his own, Ikaku's and Yumachika's. Sasuke glanced between the members of Naruto's group, mentally counting the members. Finally, realizing that there was no way that he, Ikaku and Yumachika could take on 10 people at once, he held up his hands in surrender. Realizing that they too couldn't do anything, Ikaku and Yumachika also held up their hands in surrender, albeit much more reluctantly than Sasuke. Naruto and his team gave a loud cheer as they quickly celebrated their victory against Sasuke's team. They'd done it before, but somehow it always felt like the first time whenever Naruto was with them. Like his energy was constantly bringing in a positive energy that brought them closer. Like his last name was an actual trait, having an inner energy that was constantly pulling others in. That was what made Naruto a great team leader. Later, Naruto and Sasuke lay back in the grass, both of them enjoying the silence that was around them. It was something they did every day, just taking a moment or two of silence to review whatever they were thinking about. It helped calm their nerves, as well as brought out any concerns that they might have had about their previous life. Hey, Naruto? Sasuke said, rolling onto his side to look at Naruto. Naruto turned his head. Why do you think we can't perform any jutsu outside the Chidori and the Rasengan? Naruto looked back up into the sky, quietly thinking about the question. He himself had asked it on more than one occasion, but neither of them could come up with a reasonable answer. They just couldn't seem to think of anything that would satisfy their confusion. Naruto sighed. Well, I don't know, maybe we just can't use any of our other jutsu. Sasuke shook his head. I know, but that doesn't make sense. If we're able to perform one jutsu, we should be able to perform more than one. I should be able to perform my katan techniques. Naruto nodded. I know, but I can't give you a reason as to why you can't. I mean, it would be awesome if you could, or if you could teach me, but there's just some mental block that we just can't overcome. Sasuke rolled onto his back. I know, but I would still like some closure. Naruto nodded. Ever since they'd found that they could perform the Rasengan and the Chidori, they'd been trying everything they could to recreate other techniques. But for some reason, it was like trying to look left and right at the same time. Without someone else to help them, they were stuck. After all, Kido was a cinch to perform compared to the normal jutsu, which meant that the jutsu were probably stronger. and they were able to manipulate their Ryatsu easier than their chakra. Naruto suddenly bolted up. I've got it! Sasuke propped himself up. Oh, what are you talking? I know why we can't perform jutsu, Naruto said, a small fire in his eyes as he glanced over to Sasuke. Sasuke blinked confused. Did the dope think of something that I haven't? What could he know? He grinned. What do you know? Naruto grinned, opening his mouth to speak. Then he stopped. I don't have to tell him yet. It'll be fun to see him try and figure it out. He turned away, a playful smirk on his face. I'm not telling you. Silence. Then, Naruto, I'm going to kill you! Sasuke yelled as he attempted to tackle at Naruto. Naruto dodged to the side, playfully laughing as he ran away. Catch me if you can. They ran around the field, Naruto playfully laughing as he led Sasuke on, while Sasuke was obviously trying to kill him with his bare hands. Unknown to either of them, two shadows were watching them, one looking on curiously, while the other had an almost hungry, full glare. Things will definitely be interesting around here, I'm sure of it. The second shadow thought as it slowly melded deeper into the shadows. Next day, halfway through history, Naruto tried not to bang his head against the table. They were going over the history of the Tsurugi, and as always, it felt like they weren't getting anywhere. Just going over the Quincy history, the construction of the Shinigami Academy, and other such things could only entertain him for so long. Today probably wouldn't be any different. The teacher would walk in, smiling, and tell them that they were going to do something new. A moment later, alright class, it's time for something new. Great. Naruto moaned, gently placing his head on the desk. She was now going to say that it was some kind of history lesson that they'd grown about. Today, we're going to explain the 9 levels of hell. Naruto's head shot up. Okay, I wasn't expecting that. As he glanced around, most of the other kids seemed to be a lot more excited. Apparently, this was a big topic that they were going to be talking about. No one wanted to miss it. The teacher smiled. The 9 levels of hell were originally designed to contain hollow souls that had been purified and help them become normal souls again. Each level shows how progressively bad a person was. It took longer to finish purifying in the 9th level than it was in the first. Sasuke raised his hand. Why are you speaking in past tense? That's a good question, the teacher said, smiling lightly as she went on. The 9 levels of hell still exist. However, we have no idea what goes on down there anymore. A random kid in the class spoke up. Why don't we? Because each level was guarded by its own guardian. These guardians prevented the hollows from leaving to the Rakangai. However, after an undisclosed amount of time, the overexposure to Hell's Ryatsu, they lost conscious thought and went berserk. So, if we go to Hueco Mundo, we won't survive? The teacher shook her head, obviously flustered by how many kids were suddenly questioning her on things that she was having a hard time with. No, the Hueco Mundo is filled with hollow Ryatsu, which is technically partially negative Ryatsu, due to the fact that it is driven by the negative emotions and intentions of their minds. You wouldn't die from overexposure to it. However, Hell's Ryatsu is different. It is like hollow Ryatsu, but being a compilation of only negative energy and emotions, it is 1,000 times more potent. There was a widespread chatting as people seemed surprised by this. Naruto, however, was in a state of shock. After a couple of seconds, he slowly raised his hand. Sensei, what happened to those guardians? The class fell silent at the question, turning towards their teacher. I'm not sure. However, there were rumors of where they had ended up. They called the place the Between. It was supposed to be where they rested, taking a moment before coming out and destroying the world around them. Obviously, they're probably not alive, seeing as they haven't come out in over 1,000 years or so. At those words, Naruto's ran cold. He tried to piece what he'd heard together to something he could understand. As he did, realization dawned on him. He'd figured out who the guardians were, and where they'd gone off to. He almost passed out from an overload of information, and had to take a couple of breaths to steady himself. He leaned back in his chair, slowly going over what he believed he'd heard. If what he'd realized was true, then it would explain so much of what had happened to him while he'd been in the Tsurugi. He just needed to better understand some of these things if he was going to use the knowledge correctly. Suddenly, a piece of chalk suddenly slammed into his head. Uzumaki! Did you hear what I said? Naruto shook his head. Could you repeat the question? The teacher sighed. Will you please report to the Sotecho? He wishes to see you. Naruto blinked. The Sotecho? He wants to see me? Yes, now get a move on. Don't leave Kaienfu Kotecho waiting. The teacher yelled, pointing towards the door. She didn't have to ask twice as Naruto bolted out the door, a smile on his face. After a couple of seconds, she turned back to the class. Alright, now as I was saying, Sasuke groaned as he listened to the teacher. That dobe has no idea how lucky he is. This is so boring. I mean, even Sakura ranting about how good my hair looked was more interesting. Lucky freaking dobe. Kanehagakur. Achoo, bless you Sakura-chan. Sakura nodded, a little shaken by her sneeze. After a second, she leaned back against a tree. Thank you, Lee. I think someone is talking about you, Tenten said, a smile on her face as she nuzzled into Niji's chest. The 4 of them were sitting in the shade of a couple of trees. Tenten was snuggled into Niji's chest, while Lee was sitting next to Sakura. Lee had finally convinced her to go out with him, though at a great cost for himself. However, he didn't regret a moment of it. However, who else shone with such exuberant youthfulness as his beloved Sakura? Sakura shook her head. Why would anyone other than you guys talk about me? Maybe they were speaking of your flames of youth. Lee yelled, his eyes on fire as he punched a fist into the air. The air suddenly became cold as Sakura glared at Lee. Lee, what have we talked about? Lee gulped. Less yelling, less overindulging in training, more attention to you? Sakura slowly returned to her normal, cheerful self. That's right, Lee. Now would you please be a dear, and get me something to drink? And yes, you can make a goal this time. Lee's eyes sparkled. Yosh! I will get you a drink in less than 10 minutes. If I cannot, I will do 100 push-ups consecutively. And, that's enough, Lee, Sakura said as she pulled out a stopwatch. Go! As the three watched Lee run off, Niji glanced at Sakura. You know, we tried for years to train him to do stuff like that. How did you do it? Sakura shrugged. I just encouraged him with my fists. Niji shuddered as he remembered her massive strength. Yes, that would be an excellent incentive to change a few things. Tsuruide. Achoo, I think someone's talking about you, Naruto. Shut up, Kaien, it's not funny. Naruto mumbled as he strolled through the street of the Tsuruide on his way to the Sotecho. After a moment, he glanced up at Kaien. Do you have any idea what I'm being called for? Cause, if it's anything to do with what happened to Gio, he had it coming. I mean, do you even know what dash? Kaien shook his head. I'm pretty sure that the Sotecho isn't really concerned in trivial matters as to call you out of class. Naruto sighed in relief. Oh, a mischievous grin quickly crossed Kaien's face. On the other hand, I would like to know what you did to this guy. Naruto shrugged. It wasn't much. I simply used a combination of Bakuto 1 and 9 to prevent him from getting anywhere. Then, once I'd done that, I used the fusion Hado 1 and 4 to knock him up face first against a wall and make his hair stand up. After that, it was a simple matter of several different colors to give him very pretty hair. It made it easier to convince Yuichiro Fukutecho to show no mercy when she visited us. Kaien shuddered. While it was quite childish to do such things, it was also too complicated to perform for your average academy student. He'd used 2 spells as a fusion, which was much too advanced for someone his age to perform. And for 2 Hado at the same time, that was twice as difficult. After a moment of silence, he glanced over at Naruto. What exactly did he do? Naruto shrugged. I don't remember. I think he was picking on Hanataro again. Luckily, he doesn't do that anymore. You're quite the vigilante, seeking justice for people who can't fight for themselves. Not sure what to say to that. Naruto smirked. Can't fight back? Please, Hanataro's more than able to crush guys like him without breaking a sweat. He's thrown me around on more than one occasion. It just kills his confidence when he's belittled by someone. I'm trying to break that, but it's a lot harder than it looks. Kaien looked forward again, trying to figure out what to say about that. When they'd first met, he'd been so sure that Naruto was the sort of person to help others up when they were down, and not take anything from anyone. But as he'd come to know him, he was starting to notice other things. Naruto tried his best at everything he did. He could do stuff off the top of his head better than most of the other stuff others did. He was more loyal than anyone else he'd ever met, and he had power that was growing at an exponential rate. He couldn't figure out why, but there was something about Naruto that seemed to draw people in like people couldn't stay away from him. After a couple of seconds, he realized Naruto was still talking. Plus, with all the girls that he's got, you'd think he'd just pick one and move on. Naruto practically yelled, grabbing his head. Kaien blinked. He suddenly realized that he had no idea what he was talking about, and that it was not a good idea for anyone to come into Naruto's conversations without any idea about what he was saying. Naruto waved his hand in front of Kaien's face. Hello, anyone there? Kaien shook his head. Yeah? Naruto grinned. Good, because I'm pretty sure that I'm not allowed to knock. Kaien was confused for a moment, until he finally realized that Naruto was referring to the fact that they were currently outside of the first division. He glanced at Naruto, chuckling nervously. Well, that's embarrassing. As they walked into the room, Yamamoto glanced up, several large folders in his hands. Naruto. I'm glad you could make it here on such short notice. Naruto shrugged. It's alright. I was just in the middle of history class. You know, you guys should update the curriculum. The stuff we're learning is so boring. Yamamoto chuckled. Yes, I'm quite sure that with you hands-on way of doing things it would be quite boring. After a second, he held out one of the folders to Naruto. There's something that required your help. If you could? Naruto nodded, taking the folder from Yamamoto. He opened it, trying to figure out what was so important that he needed to be called here. As soon as he saw what was in it though, he needed a lot more explaining. Why do you have information on Orochimaru? Orochimaru is just one of a few people we know quite a bit about. Yamamoto said, showing that he had quite a few folders that were obviously on other people. We're simply concerned by what he can do, and how far he's trying to reach into our society. We need you to try and confirm as much as possible on him so that we can be prepared for when he dies. Naruto shook his head, confused. Why do you want to know more about him for when he dies? Because he perfected a technique that allowed him to live forever, by inhabiting the bodies of other people. This means that when he dies, there is a high possibility of him becoming a hollow. We simply need to know what to expect before confronting him. Now please, what do you know about him? Naruto shook his head. I don't know. I mean, I could tell you a few things, but I'm sure that they wouldn't be as useful to you as someone who actually worked for him. Heck, even Sasuke might be better. Yamamoto raised an eyebrow. Sasuke? Naruto nodded. Yeah, he was marked by Orochimaru with a strange seal. It happened in the forest right after I passed out. I didn't find out about it till I fought him in the Valley of the End, where we died. The seal was like 3 little komas spinning in a circle, and when Sasuke was completely covered by the flames, he turned into this ugly, bird-like thing. The cursed seal of heaven? Naruto shrugged. I guess so. I mean, I wouldn't know the exact terms that Orochimaru used or why he wanted Sasuke so bad. All I know is that he was up to no good and he's a very, very greedy guy. Freaking snake. Yamamoto bowed his head, thinking over what Naruto had told him. I see. What you've said will be put into consideration. Thank you for your time and do try to prepare for your history exam. What exam? Naruto asked, looking somewhat confused as Yamamoto gathered his folders and walked away. What exam? Kaien just sighed. Even when it's told to his face, he doesn't completely see it. He glanced over at Naruto, who was trying to figure out what had happened, and grinned. I wouldn't want him any other way. Hospital. He didn't know anything, just like you said. Yamamoto said, sitting next to a hospital bed. The person in the bed was covered by bandages, so people couldn't see who it was. It also muffled his voice slightly, making it more difficult for other people to hear what he was saying. You see, Yamamoto-san, I do know more about Naruto than you think. Yes, you do, Yamamoto said, tapping his staff on the floor. However, I'm more interested in the information about Orochimaru and his seals. The man sighed. It's rather simple. The seal draws on an inner energy that makes a person much, much stronger than they would normally be. Each seal draws on a certain negative emotion, forcing the person to become consumed by that emotion. So in other words, it draws out of that energy? Yamamoto asked, glancing at the ceiling. Yes. This usually makes stronger hollows in the afterlife, but from what you've told me, Sasuke didn't turn into a hollow, or hasn't yet. I'm not sure why, or how, but there is definitely something we're missing about him. Yamamoto nodded. Yes, I'm sure that we are. However, we are not going to bother ourselves until we absolutely have to. After a moment's silence, he glanced back at the man. How are you feeling? The man chuckled. Well, normally that's the first thing a person asks when walking into a sick person's room. I was trying to get the business portion done before, so that you would be relaxed when I left. It wouldn't do for you to continue to deteriorate in health. No, we don't need that. Thank you for your concern. I am doing rather well, despite the mild discomfort that's come from having that kind of treatment. Yamamoto's head lowered ever so slightly, almost looking ashamed. I don't believe that it was intentional. However, it would be good to see you in good health soon. The man chuckled. I know. Please give my regards to them, will you? Yamamoto stood up. Yes, I'll make sure to do that. Please have a good day. Giving the man a small bow, Yamamoto quickly walked out of his room. After a moment, the man chuckled again. So Naruto and Sasuke both managed to get here? I would never have guessed it. I guess that explains the explosions that I've been hearing and his pranks. I just hope no one's been hurt by them. Kido room. Boom. Holy crap, that was big. Naruto said, grinning widely as he looked at the damage caused by his Kido. Everyone else in the classroom gaped at the size of the destruction. It was huge. The entire wall behind their required target was completely blown away, leaving very little behind. For someone to take a small Kido that was supposed to be more accurate than anything else, and turn it into something of mass destruction was simply amazing. Sasuke chuckled. He'd seen Naruto do so much more destruction with smaller Kido, and less Ryatsu. But he knew that Naruto just wanted to show off a little bit. He couldn't do it with his studies, so he did it in Heido, Hakuda, and Zanjutsu. He himself was better at Bakudo, Hakuda, and Zanjutsu, but Naruto was just a brute when fighting that made him harder to beat. He's strong, isn't he? Sasuke mentally nodded, not quite sure of what had been happening. He'd just woken up one morning, and this strange voice was speaking to him. It held so much power behind it, that he was somewhat frightened at first. But after a while, he'd managed to get used to the little comments that it would make about Naruto or school life. Sasuke sighed. He wasn't sure what it was, but it was supposed to be a good thing. After all, a few people actually made contact with their Zanpakuto spirits before they'd even gotten their Zanpakuto, like that midget Toshiro. He'd managed to hear his, and quickly became captain. He slightly hoped he could do the same, but only time will tell. Sasuke smiled. It had a bad habit of completing his thoughts, even if he wasn't directing them at it. But it was nice to know that someone understood him so well. As he watched Naruto getting praise from the other kids and a few of the teachers, he closed his eyes. He wasn't sure why, but he felt slightly jealous of Naruto. Everyone was around him, trying to talk to him, trying to be like him. He had similar things happen to him back in the Shinobi Academy, and so he understood what was happening. However, he'd rejected everyone, so he had no idea what Naruto was really feeling right now. It had to feel pretty good considering how large his smile was. There is no need to feel envy for what you could have had. Look forward to now, and you will succeed, Sasuke nodded. It was weird to be getting advice from someone within himself, but who else knew him as well? And the advice was actually starting to make his life easier to live through. Hey Sasuke! Come over here! Naruto yelled, pulling him from his thoughts. Sasuke glanced up, seeing Naruto and the rest of his classmates staring at him. After a couple of seconds he smirked. Undisclosed location. How is our progress? Pain asked, glaring at the projections of the other members of the Akatsuki. Kakuzu spoke first. We've managed to kill the Sanbai, Gobi, and Shichibi, basically the ones who haven't been sealed yet. Pain nodded. And how are we progressing there? Haiden suddenly spoke. Why do you want to know you dash? Haiden, please be respectful, Itachi said, glaring towards him. After a couple of seconds, as Haiden began to mumble something about Jashin, he turned back to Pain. We've already sent Sasori and Deidara to kill the Jinchuriki of the Ichibi, and Haiden and Kakuzu will be going after the Nibi as soon as possible. Why are you volunteering us for this assignment? Kakuzu asked. Itachi glanced at him. There is a chance that after the Nibi is killed, you will be able to give her body for a rather large bounty. After all, she's managed to make quite the name for herself. Kakuzu nodded, an almost full grin crossing his face. I see, thank you, Itachi. I do believe that this will be most beneficial. Pain sighed. Itachi, what is the status of Orochimaru's lair? We've come a long way. We've talked with Sasori, and he told us that he has a spy within Orochimaru's ranks. He's planning on meeting him in 3 weeks or so to obtain any information that he can before we attack Orochimaru. Pain nodded. Excellent, Itachi nodded. Indeed. However, not to be the judge of Sasori's sealing technique, but I do believe that Orochimaru will be at the meeting place. Pain raised an eyebrow. And what makes you say that? He is no fool. He needs to be aware of all his rank status, or they may turn against him. It would be a simple matter to find and remove the seal placed on this person. What do you suggest? I wish to take Kisame and observe the meeting. Should anything go wrong, and Orochimaru shows up, we will move in and take him out then and there, Itachi said, a small trace of malice in his voice. Pain noticed this. I do believe that you are looking forward to this confrontation, are you not? Itachi nodded. I am. And I will make sure that Orochimaru falls before he can continue to interfere with our plans. Pain shook his head. Don't let your emotions get the better of you. Attack him only if Sasori needs help, or gives you some kind of signal that suggests that he might need help. Understood? Itachi nodded, and quickly faded out. After another moment, everyone else began to fade away as well, disappearing to go and do what they'd been asked to do. As Pain left, he glanced over into a corner of his room. Hello, Madara. From the shadows, a figure wearing a completely black outfit, with an orange mask that swirled toward his right eye, the only open portion of the mask. Pain locked eyes with him, knowing full and well what Madara was here for. After a moment of complete silence, Madara spoke. Why are you killing off the Bija? Pain spoke impassively, not revealing any emotion as he spoke. I am doing it so that no one else can obtain the Bija for their own purposes. Yes, but that also forces my backup plan to fail, Madara said, rage apparent in every word he spoke. Did you even think about that? Pain nodded. I did. However, it is too risky to allow that plan to go into effect. As such, I deemed it necessary to finish them now. Madara stared at Pain, looking into one eye, then the other. Finally, realization dawned on him. He growled as he spoke, You don't trust me. Pain nodded. No, I do not. You think that your version of peace will work out better than mine? Mine, which has been planned out for over 100 years, compared to your pitiful excuse at peace. Pain nodded again. I know that it will work because I am a god. You are trying to betray me? Pain shook his head. You have never been the true leader. You have hidden in the shadows, not taking command as you should have. He suddenly turned to a nearby window. If you wish for the organization to follow your command, then take my position from me if you can. Leaping through the window, Pain signaled Conan to bring out the animal realm. He would need all of his bodies to defeat him, and he would defeat him. After a second, he stood in front of Madara again, all 6 of his bodies moving together after Animal Realm had arrived and summoned them. Madara glared at him, as he and the 6 Pains charged at each other, both sides attempting to take the other out of the picture. It would be a fight that no one would remember, and yet would be the turning point of many lives. Naruto grinned as he sat down in his Zanjutsu class. He was practically bouncing where he sat as he stared at his teacher. Sasuke, who was sitting next to Naruto, groaned at how hyper Naruto was being. But then, he had every reason to be. After all, today was the day they obtained a real Zanpakuto to train and use throughout the rest of their lives. Naruto stopped moving as the teacher glanced in his direction, apparently annoyed by how much energy he had. Of course, containing the energy was something that Naruto had to completely concentrate on. If anyone looked close enough, they'd see a layer of sweat on his face. It was literally that hard for him to do. Sasuke, on the other hand, was the example of perfect self-control. Sitting cross-legged, he managed to look straight ahead while seeing everything around him. His attention was razor-sharp, ready to move to the next thing at a moment's notice, something that the teachers greatly admired and enjoyed. His sponge-like mind helped that by letting him learn the different stances and techniques faster than most of the other people. He'd even managed to get a teacher to start teaching some of the more advanced techniques. Naruto, on the other hand, couldn't be taught no matter what anyone tried to do, an 11th division member if they ever saw one. However, he still had a form that none of the students could completely read because of that. He was constantly adding new movements, sometimes even throwing a little hakuda into his techniques, confusing his enemies, and making Sasuke yell about how they were in the middle of a kenjutsu class. It was like music to his ears. As the teacher began to move around, Naruto straightened up a little more. He craned his neck forward, trying to catch anything that would be useful to him for the creation. After a moment, the teacher finally began to explain what he wanted to hear. The teacher grabbed a small ball and held it up for the class to see. Now, the creating of a Zanpakuto is not as easy as some people may believe it to be. We will give each of you a ball of raw Ryatsu in which you will have to mold your Ryatsu into it. This will bring you into your inner world, where you should meet your Zanpakuto spirit. Your spirit will then allow you to create your Zanpakuto. None of you will be able to hear your spirit's name just yet, but you will in time, as this is necessary to unleash your Shurikai. Now, not all of you will be able to do this. As such, the Asachi, shallow hit, was created so that you can continue your profession as a Shinigami. You just won't have the ability to achieve Shurikai just yet. Some of the kids began to cry in outrage at this. Not being able to achieve Shurikai. Were they allowed to do that? Why could some do it and others not? Was their inner world scary? Naruto just leaned back, a small grin on his face. It was actually easier than he thought it was going to be. He'd know that it was going to be some dark, mysterious process, like having to fight a real hollow till you got it. But this was so much easier. Just put some Ryatsu into a ball. Piece of cake. Now we want you to come forward one at a time, starting from the beginning. Naruto sighed, sticking his legs out from underneath himself and reclining where he sat. He was going to be one of the last people, so why should he start to get stressed out? There was really no rhyme or reason to doing so. Suddenly, a voice cut through his thoughts. Lazy as ever, right Naruto? Naruto tilted his head back till he saw who was standing behind him. Eh? Kaian. Kaian grinned. Hey man, just wanted to see you and Sasuke get your Zanpakutos. Naruto quickly spun around to look at Kaian. Really? Did you want to see my totally awesome, super powerful Zanpakuto? Kaian chuckled. And what makes you think that it's going to be like that? Naruto shrugged. It's a few things that are totally obvious about myself, and my Zanpakuto's spirit is the manifestation of my spirit powers. So it would take the form of something that looked totally cool, able to launch powerful waves of energy, and could fell giant Minos with one swoop. I wouldn't go that far, Kaian said, trying to understand Naruto's train of thought. He never could understand what was going on with Naruto's humble ego, something that shouldn't have existed. But then, Naruto was far beyond the normal, he was abnormal. Naruto chuckled. I guess so. I'll just leave out the powerful waves of energy part. It has to be that strong. Sasuke suddenly chuckled. Yeah, you verse a Minos squishes you like some bug. Victory goes to the big, fat, and ugly. Naruto blinked. Then, a grin crossed his face as he started laughing. Sasuke made a funny. Kaian leaned over to Sasuke as Naruto suddenly went off on a tangent about how rare it was for Sasuke to say something funny. How do you stand rooming with him again? Sasuke sighed. Patience, a lot of willpower, and an emergency hammer on hand at all times. You can never be too careful with him enticing the women around here. Kaian blinked. What are you? Just look behind you, Sasuke said, closing his eyes as he began to meditate. Kaian glanced behind him, and almost cried. Naruto was surrounded by practically every girl in the class. They were all talking at once, and Naruto seemed to be able to jump from conversation to conversation without missing a beat. As he watched, the girls seemed to have some kind of game where they'd all ask Naruto questions at the same time, and then ask Naruto what the answer was to each of their questions. Surprisingly, he looked them all in the eyes and gave them the correct answer every time. Now if only he could apply that to his academy work. You know, he'd probably be at the top of the class if he spent as much time on his schoolwork as he does trying to listen to all of the girls at once and remembering who said what. Sasuke said, as though he'd read Kaian's thoughts. Of course, he's too busy messing around to do stuff like that, so he won't be able to get higher than he is at. Kaian shrugged. I don't know, he's got quite the group of girls. I'd bet he's preparing himself for later, so he could get a wife. Sasuke opened an eye, glancing at Kaian. Speaking of which, how's your wife been? Kaian chuckled nervously. Well, she's doing alright. There's not much with her, but I love her. I love her a lot. Suddenly, Kaian seemed to remember something. Oh, I almost forgot, she wants you and Naruto to meet my family tonight. Do you think that'll be alright with the two of you? Why couldn't we meet her before? Sasuke asked as he glanced over at Kaien. Well, academy students aren't allowed to leave the academy without a parent of guardian's permission until they get their Zanpakutos. Since I am neither your parent or guardian, I couldn't get either of you guys out until now. That's why I told Naruto to keep his grades up for the last 3 years. Kaien suddenly scratched the back of his head nervously. I just remembered something. My sister Kakaku and my brother Ganju might be joining us. They don't come by all that often, seeing as I'm usually consumed by my duties, and they might just drop in seeing as I've asked for a day off today. I hope that won't be too troublesome. Sasuke nodded. He'd expected as much, seeing as they'd been in the academy too long to actually meet his family. They'd heard a lot about them whenever they brought up the subject. They had guessed that it would happen sooner or later. Although some stuff about his sister seemed kind of scary. Suddenly, the teacher yelled, Uchiha Sasuke. Sasuke blinked, slowly getting up. Has time gone by so fast? Have I really gotten to this point? Taking an even breath, he took the ball from his teacher's hands. Walking away, he quietly sat down on the side of one of the dueling arenas. He could feel several people's eyes on him, but quickly brushed them off. He needed to concentrate on what he was doing. However, this became unnecessary as the moment he pushed some of his Ryatsu into the ball, he felt himself being sucked into what felt like a deep dark pit. Then, there was silence. Sasuke's inner world. Sasuke slowly opened his eyes. He found himself in the middle of a golden-colored, grassy plain, a few trees popping up here and there. The sky had several, darkened clouds which cast shadows over the land, giving the land a remarkable feeling which he was sure couldn't be said in the words he knew of. But if he had to use one word to sum up what he was seeing, that word would be amazing. It was simply how such a primitive place seemed to hold so much power and mystery about it that captivated him as his eyes continued to look around. This is my inner world? Sasuke thought as he glanced around. The area extended beyond the horizon, a never-ending land that seemed to hold the very essence of his spirit. As he thought this, he remembered why he'd come to this place. Glancing around, he came to this realization that his Zanpakuto spirit was nowhere in sight. He swore to himself, how am I supposed to find my Zanpakuto spirit in all of this? Hello Sasuke. Sasuke jumped, surprised to hear someone's voice in this world. It was familiar, and yet foreign. Like he'd heard it through some kind of filter before hearing it now. As the realization of who it was hit him, he found him face to face with his Zanpakuto spirit. He blinked, trying to understand what he was seeing. This was impossible, wasn't it? I'm quite certain that this is possible, in here or the real world. So, what are you? Sasuke asked, looking the creature over. Its head came up to just below his chin. The large amount of hair made him nearly at his nose. He was obviously a predator, something that was supposed to take down anything and everything around itself. Its large jaw was closed, hiding the sharp fangs that could probably take a chunk out of him any time it wanted. Its large paws, which were equipped with claws that nearly scared him, were at least as large as his own feet. From what he could see, it was about as long as he was tall, with thick, coiled muscles rippling as it slowly began to move around him. Yet another thing that proved its strength. On its forehead was a black, six-petal flower. When he saw it, he felt somewhat familiar, like he'd seen it before. You asked what species I am? An interesting question. The species I am is in the large cat family, a male lion to be exact. The king of the jungle for a better title. The creature said almost smugly, slowly walking around Sasuke. Its voice was strange, like it was echoing within its throat before he spoke. It was a deep voice that appeared to both calm and terrify Sasuke. He'd heard that voice so many times before when he was just talking to him in the real world. Sasuke stood where he was, letting it do as it pleased as it circled him. Do you have a name? Yes. My name is... Sasuke grimaced, realizing why he couldn't hear the name. Ah, so that's what they meant. The lion bowed his head. Yes, your teacher was not stretching the truth. In reality, you shouldn't even be able to hear me as well as you can. Then why can I? Sasuke asked, turning to face the lion. All will be revealed in time. The lion said, slowly walking away. As he did so, he slammed one of his paws against the ground. A normal katana slowly sprouted from the air around Sasuke as he did so. You will require this for when you hear my name. Never forget you are not alone. Sasuke tried to say something, but felt himself being dragged out of his world. Struggling as hard as he could, he soon realized it was pointless as he watched himself being dragged out of his inner world. Real world. Naruto grinned as Sasuke began to regain consciousness. He was sitting right in front of him, just waiting for him to wake up. It was taking a lot out of him to sit quietly in front of him, but Sasuke's reaction would be worth every moment. Sasuke slowly began to open his eyes, sluggishly awakening from the process of creating a Zanpakuto. As his eyes began to open, he began to realize that someone was sitting in front of him. Squeezing his eyes shut, he quickly opened one. The blurry shape slowly took shape, quickly becoming Naruto. This wouldn't have been as abnormal as many people might think, seeing as Naruto did this to him all the time. However, having just come back from his inner world, he was a little on edge, so when he saw Naruto's face in front of him, he only did what came natural. He hit him. Naruto fell back on his butt, blinking in confusion. After regaining himself, he grinned at Sasuke. Someone's a little edge, aren't you? Sasuke rubbed his eyes. Shut up, Dobe, I'm not in the mood right now, Naruto shrugged. Okay, just don't kill me until after I get my Zanpakuto too, Sasuke blinked. What? He then noticed that in place of the Ryatsu ball that had been in front of him, a simple katana had taken its place. It wasn't elegant, or complex, but it was different from the Asachi's normal appearance. It had a hexagon-like guard, with a golden cloth wrapped just below the guard, and before the handle. Quickly drawing the sword, Sasuke looked over the blade, noticing how exquisite it was in comparison. It was like the blade was actually breathing in the energy around him. Naruto watched as Sasuke studied his blade, almost jealous of him. All of the teachers had told everyone else to watch him as he did it so that they could get a better idea of how it was done. He watched for a couple of seconds before realizing that they were joking with him, pulling their legs to see how many people would actually watch him. And considering most of the people in the class had been unable to create their own Zanpakuto, everyone was watching him. Uzumaki Naruto. Naruto jumped up, grinning from ear to ear. It was finally his turn, his time to shine. He practically skipped over to get the ball. The instructor smiled as he handed the ball to Naruto, whose grin never slipped as he picked it up. The moment he did so, his eyes widened in surprise. His hands gripped the ball as though he were in pain. His breathing was suddenly harder, as though the air had gotten thicker. Everyone else were feeling the same way, as a large amount of silver Ryatsu was suddenly pouring off of Naruto, pushing the teachers back to a safe distance as they watched him. Kaien and Sasuke could just watch in awe as his power continued to grow, exceeding anything Sasuke had ever seen. For Kaien, Naruto's Ryatsu would be at least a 12th seat in any division. Finally, as it reached the point where the class was moments away from passing out, Naruto's eyes rolled into the back of his head, and he collapsed. Sasuke rushed over to Naruto, trying to figure out what had just happened. The teachers kept their distance, not wanting to get any closer to Naruto due to the amount of power that he'd just shown. They were taught what to do when stuff like that happened. They had only made it to around 15th seat or so before being assigned to the academy. He had more powerful than they though he would be. Kaien walked over, surprise evident on his face as he looked down on Naruto. He had not had that much power when he and Kaien had first met. He might have made it as someone who was just above people within Asachi. But now his growth had been amazing. To have that much power and the possible potential of having it continue to grow was amazing. He was so going to enjoy teaching him Shunpa, Naruto's inner world. Naruto never would have guessed that this was what his inner world looked like. He'd expected something less than this. This brought back so many memories, so many things that he'd almost forgotten after he'd died. His inner world was the training ground where the memorial stone was. In fact, there was a large, blank stone where the memorial stone would have been in real life. The fact that it was blank made him feel a little strange, almost like he was relieved. The grass, the trees, even the clouds appeared the same as that very day that he'd become a genin, when he'd started the path to where he could have one day become one of the great and powerful Hokages. The air blew lightly through the trees, tossing his hair lightly as it seemed to dance within it. His kimono caught parts of the wind, billowing out in an almost comical fashion. He slowly looked around, trying to see if anyone else was with him. After realizing that he was alone, he grimaced. This totally sucks. I'm on the training ground where I became a genin, I'm all alone, and I'm so freaking hungry. Grimacing again, he looked around to see if there was any food. It was his inner world, surely there would be food somewhere. Maybe a large bowl of steaming ramen. Oh, the joys of ramen. Naruto stopped turning around as something caught his attention. A light gleam caught off a portion of the object, making him walk towards it. In front of the memorial stone was something that had not been there before. He slowly walked up to it, getting closer to get a better look at the object. He blinked as he figured out what he was seeing. It was a sword. Not exactly as large as he thought it was going to be, but at the same time, it was definitely a sword. Slowly, he reached down and picked it up. It was just a little bit larger than a normal wakizashi, maybe by a few inches or so at most. Its guard, unlike almost every other guard he'd seen, was triangular in shape. The abnormality of it was fitting for it, as it fit with himself. Slowly, he drew it from its scabbard. It had an almost light luster, one which caught the light and let only the tiniest bit off of it. Slowly, he gave it a light swing. He grinned. It wasn't too long, so he could lure his enemies into a Hakuta match where he'd still be able to strike them with the blade. But at the same time, it was just long enough that he wouldn't lose should he get into heavy grapples with an enemy. Its weight was perfectly balanced so as to give it the strength to move dexterously through the air, as well as through a battle. It was definitely the perfect blade for him. What will you use it for? Naruto blinked. Someone else is here? Wait, I know that voice. For a brief moment, he considered turning around, but then he stopped. He didn't need to know, not right now. I guess that depends. What are my options? You have the ability to use that blade for everything, and anything you want. If you want to, you could use it to cause mass destruction to everything and everyone around you. Or you could use it as a shield to defend yourself. Which will you choose? Naruto groaned. Why do people like you always have to ask stuff like this? There's no way to answer that question without being wrong. Explain, Naruto growled. If I say one, I'll be considered a danger to society, and to everyone around me. If I choose the other, I'm self-centered, and could get everyone killed. Did I say that I would judge you based on your decision? Naruto shook his head. No, but that's what anyone else would do. Why can't I just attack to defend? Explain. Naruto slowly held the sword out in front of himself, letting it once again catch the light. Well, how should I put it? He slowly tilted the blade from side to side, before giving it a quickly slashing movement. I want a bladed shield, something that will allow me to become a sword for myself, as well as a shield for others. After all, isn't the best defense an even better offense? Isn't that the original purpose of all weapons? To use as tools to protect themselves from their enemies? If that's still true today, then why can't I say that? You just did. Naruto blinked. Oh well, yeah, I guess I did. A small grin crossed his face as he sheathed his sword. That is our purpose, to use my own hands to push forward and attack because it is the best way to defend. I see. Well, that is truly a powerful purpose for us to follow. I hope that you call on me soon. Naruto nodded. See you around. Hey, maybe next time, I'll ask your name for real. Behind him, his Zanpakuto's spirit grinned. Until then, remember what you have said. It may help you more than you realize. Naruto smiled as he felt the light tugging of his body pulling himself out into the real world. After a moment, another figure came out. He was completely covered in shadows, obscured from the view of everyone. You just let him walk off. Without even trying to tell him your name? Hi, there is no reason for me to push him further than is necessary. However, it would do well for you to stop this growth that you are attempting to push on him. We don't wish for him to stand out just yet. You're no fun. Can I just? No, not until after the academy. But the Uchihas won't stop. Why should I? Because we are not the Uchiha, and you are able to make Naruto's power rise much faster than the Uchihas ever could. Understand? So you're saying that I'm doing too good of a job at what I'm doing? Precisely. Damn, go cry somewhere else. The second figure just laughed as it slunk back into the forest, leaving the first to himself. He's such a pest. However necessary he is to Naruto's development in the future, I will not allow him to do whatever he pleases. A silvery mist slowly began to encircle him. I vow to protect you just like my king has vowed to protect everyone else. Please prepare yourself for my power. Real world. Naruto's eyes slowly opened, a throbbing pain shooting through his head. After a moment, he began to make out a few people around him. Hanataro was sitting directly over his head, a look of concentration on his face. Sasuke and Kaien were either side of him, concerned looks on their faces as they watched Hanataro and himself. He could just barely see the shadows of a lot of the other students who were talking amongst themselves. Naruto groaned, alerting everyone to his mental state. Within moments, everyone was crowding around him, trying to see if he was alright, or just to see him. It took Sasuke, Kaien, and all of the teachers to push them back and give him a little bit of room to get up. He was lightly glad about this, as the moment he sat up, he felt like he was going to puke. What happened? Naruto asked, his eyes closed as he tried to contain the rising bile in his throat. You passed out when you touched the Ryatsu ball. Apparently, no one has had the amount of Ryatsu before touching one, so it overloaded your senses and forced you to pass out. Hanataro said, slowly spreading the medical keto through Naruto's body. If you feel any discomfort or sickness, it might be because you hit your head pretty hard when you fell down. If you move around too much, you throw up. A few people close to them quickly backpedaled when they heard this. No one wanted to be covered in puke regardless of whether or not it was an accident. Naruto grimaced. Thanks for the heads up. Kaien grinned as he knelt next to Naruto. So, have you seen your Zanpakuto yet? Naruto nodded, raising his Zanpakuto to let Kaien see it. Kaien examined it carefully, a little surprised by how small it was despite Naruto's large amount of Ryatsu. If he hadn't been given a Ryatsu ball to channel and create his Zanpakuto for even a few more years, he probably wouldn't have been able to reseal it, or at least, it would have been quite difficult to reseal. He doubted that Zaraki Taicho knew how to seal his Zanpakuto, mostly due to the fact that he didn't bother learning its name. Had he the decency to ask it, he would probably be able to become even stronger. It's an awesome sword, Naruto, Hanataro said, looking it over, a small grin on his face as he looked at it. I bet my Zanpakuto won't that cool. Your Zanpakuto's spirit probably looks cooler too. Naruto scratched the back of his head. I didn't see him. I mean, I could have, but I didn't want to right now. Kaien looked at him curiously. I think I'm confused. Why wouldn't you want to see him right now? Naruto shrugged. I'm horrible with names, and usually have to put them with a face to get them stuck in my head. I don't want to not know what he looks like till I know what his name is. Kaien nodded. I guess that makes sense. Are you going to tell him? Sasuke said, taking Naruto's sword and looking it over. He had a light, almost superior grin as he looked it over. It left after he drew it, and was replaced with something that was closer to all. Kaien snapped his fingers. Oh yeah. My family wants to meet you today at my sister's house, and since you and Sasuke have your Zanpakuto, you're allowed to leave the academy for periods of time. So what do you say? Naruto was about to answer but suddenly waved for Hanataro to get him a trash can. Hanataro just barely gave it to him before he puked into the bucket. Kyan looked slightly amused. Geez, Naruto, all you had to do was say no. Naruto shook his head, trying to make his headache recede. I would love to come, Kyan grinned. Great to hear. Now, try and recover quickly. We don't want you to be too sick when you meet them. He quickly stood up, bowed to their teachers and walked out. After a couple of seconds, Hanetaro glanced at Naruto. Wow, you're friends with him? Naruto nodded. Why? Am I not supposed to be friends with him? It's not that, it's just that he's from a noble family. Hanetaro said, waving his arms around as he tried to make his point. His sister is supposed to be an insane pyromaniac who blows stuff up for fun all the time. Naruto shrugged. It'll be a much better atmosphere than the silence I can never seem to get away from. It's so boring. Hanetaro was about to say something when the teacher yelled, Yamada Hanetaro. Oh. I'm up, please wish me luck. Hanetaro said as he walked over to the teachers. Sasuke sat down next to Naruto. So we're going to meet Kyan's family? Naruto nodded. I guess so. The two of them stared straight ahead for a moment. Then I'm pretty sure that Kakaku is going to kill you the moment you step in the door. You're too much alike. Naruto shrugged. You're probably more screwed. Opposites attract, you know. A vein bulged on Sasuke's head. Watch it, dope. Make me, team, that's it. Sasuke roared as he drew his Zanpakuto. The rest of the class scattered as Naruto drew his own sword free of its scabbard. They both clashed with each other until they were both bashed over the head by one of their instructors who finally noticed them fighting. After a stern lecture, they were sent to their next class. Later that day, this feels weird. Normally, I wouldn't agree. But this it way too much. Naruto grabbed either side of his head. What sort of crazy woman lives in a house like this? Just as he said, the house was weird, and that was quite the understatement. It was a huge house with two wooden arms situated on either side of the building holding a banner saying Shiba Residence. Luckily, Kyan was standing in front of it, bringing a small amount of normality to the home. Both Naruto and Sasuke greeted the guards before they walked in, wondering what Kakaku and Ganju were like. As they entered the dining room, they were greeted with the sight of three people sitting around the table, two girls and one guy. The first girl seemed pleasant enough, black kimono, hair pulled back into a bun, and a smile on her face. Obviously Kyan's wife. The other two could not have been related to Kyan. The girl, although missing her right arm, was lounging about, apparently not caring what was going on at that particular moment. Her thoughts seemed to be elsewhere as she stared at the ceiling. The boy, on the other hand, while a little bit respectful, had no sense of manners. He quickly changed back to his normal self once he saw that Naruto and Sasuke were with Kyan, obviously not caring about what they thought of him. Naruto and Sasuke glanced at each other. Even though they weren't able to read each other's thoughts, they knew they were thinking the same thing. What have we gotten ourselves into? Naruto, Sasuke, I'd like you to meet my family. Kyan said, a courteous smile on his face. First is my wife, Shiba Miyako. The woman bowed as Kyan motioned to her. My sister, Shiba Kakaku. The one-armed girl just gave a quick wave before continuing her staring. And my brother, Shiba Ganju. He's the weird one. And I-san. I'm not weird, Ganju said, glaring at his brother. Kyan shrugged. You still play in the dirt, fight dirty, and ride those hogs. You're officially past weird. Ganju had a thunderstruck face as he continued to stare at Kyan, who calmly sat down at the table. So, what's for dinner? Nothing that will blow up in our guests' faces, I hope, Kakaku sighed. I only did that once and you know it. You did it to a captain. He had it coming. The freak was freaking hitting on me. Naruto and Sasuke glanced at each other. Kiraka, that doesn't change anything, Kyan said, trying not to raise his voice. Kyan-san? Naruto asked, glancing at his friend. Don't you think that he might have had it coming? She is a master of explosives, like you said. Kyan thought it over. Well, considering it was Kiraka, I'll let it slide. But that won't stop me from teasing you about it, Kakaku pouted. Well then, maybe I should let our guests know how you met your wife. Kyan suddenly paled. Please don't. They don't need to know that, Miyako blushed. Kyan is right. Please don't tell them, Kakaku shrugged. Well, since you asked so nicely, sure. She leaned forward, an evil gleam in her eyes. That's strike one, Kyan gulped. He knew his sister wasn't kidding around, and would not let him down unless he was able to distract her. A sudden, deep growl suddenly filled the room. All eyes fell on Naruto, who grinned sheepishly. Hey, what do you got to eat? I'm starving, Kakaku shrugged. I didn't make it, asked Miyako. We're having food dobe. Or did you not figure that out? Sasuke drawled out, trying to make Naruto sound stupider than he normally did. Naruto chuckled. Sasuke, you made another funny. Ganju suddenly started chuckling. Oh, and I'm the only one here who's weird? What about him? Naruto shrugged. I'm not entertained by playing in a sandbox. A small silence filled the room. Then, why did you have to say that in Isan? Ganju yelled as he tried to attack Naruto. Naruto didn't flinch as he grabbed Ganju's arm and threw him over his head. Kakaku raised an eyebrow. Ganju was no small guy. He had plenty of muscle to back up some of the stuff he did. Plus with his dirt magic, which vaguely resembled Kido, he was actually pretty hard to beat when he wasn't fooling around. This kid might be able to become something great someday. She glanced over at Kaien. Okay, who are the kids again? Naruto and Sasuke. They're two kids I met on one of my border runs when I was third seat. We became pretty good friends over time, and they are currently in the academy. Shiomi smiled. Well, it is nice to meet the both of you. Ganju suddenly jumped up. It doesn't matter. I will destroy you for your insults of myself. Ganju bolted forward, intent on slamming Naruto into the table. Naruto quickly stood up, grabbing Ganju by his shirt in the middle of his charge. Then, after sweeping his legs from underneath him, he swung him in a counterclockwise direction while pushing him away. After spinning him to the point that his head was facing downward, he shoved Ganju backward. Ganju actually slid quite a distance before coming to a stop outside of the dining room doors, unconscious. Naruto slowly walked over and quietly closed the door. If Kakaku had been surprised by his previous throw, she was blown away by that. For someone who was still in the academy to perform such an advanced Aikido technique, it shouldn't have been possible. Hey kid, how'd you do that? Naruto glanced at her before shrugging. I don't know, I just make it up as I go along. Kaien chuckled. It's what makes him a dangerous fighter. No one can follow his thought process, or his techniques. What thought process? Sasuke asked, taking a rice ball from the plate that Shiomi had brought out. Naruto grumbled. I think that's the third time you've made a funny tonight. Too bad I was the butt of this joke. It might have been funnier. Kakaku, Kaien, Sasuke and Miyako laughed at Naruto, who soon joined in on their laughter. They were so busy laughing they totally missed Ganju sliding back to his seat at the table. Ganju glanced at Naruto. It was impossible. If what Kaien had said was true, then he couldn't have been much older than himself. But the amount of skill that he used was beyond the many things that he'd seen his brother do with his Zanpakuto. And he was using pure Hakuda. If he added some Kido to it, a mischievous grin crossed his face as he spun his hand in a circle next to Naruto, sending a tiny amount of Ryatsu into the floor. Naruto didn't notice till the last second, and found himself trapped up to his armpits in some kind of quicksand. Blinking in confusion, he glanced up at Ganju, who had a look of triumph on his face. Naruto's mind took a moment to process the information, trying to figure out the fastest way to get back at Ganju. After a couple of seconds, he came up with his answer. Hado 1, Show Thrust. Ganju's last expression before he went flying back was one of complete confusion. He didn't stand a chance as he went flying headfirst into a wall. Kakaku hardly spared him a second glance. He deserved it. Attacking a guest is unprofessional for a noble. Kaien shrugged. While that might be true, Naruto didn't have to do that. Using Kido to knock him away? Why not Bakudo? It's cleaner? Sasuke chuckled as Naruto looked away. It turns out, Naruto's gotten good grades because all of the Bakudo spells are below number 25. The moment he tries anything like that, his skill goes out the window. Seriously, he actually bound himself with the Bakudo he was supposed to do. It was really funny, Naruto grumbled. Bakudo never did me much good anyways. Besides, I'm working on making something much cooler. Sasuke blinked. Are you talking about that? Naruto shook his head. No, not that, just a different version of some of the Hado. Really? Kaien said, giving Naruto a curious glance. Naruto nodded nervously. Yeah, but don't tell anyone. If anyone finds out, I might be put in the 12th division. Everyone at the table shuddered at the thought of him in 12th division, and what the captain might do. Or even worse, what Naruto might bring about if he became captain. A person who spontaneously jumped from thing to thing, usually having things blow up in his face, it would destroy the Suriidai. Oh, what did I miss? Ganju asked, groggily getting up. Naruto stared at him for a moment before glancing over to Kaien. He's got a great recovery time. Kaien nodded. I think this is a new record. Kakaku, have you been pounding him in the head again? Kakaku glanced at her nails innocently. Maybe. Can I have some more? Sasuke asked, holding out his bowl to Miyako. Oh, do you like it? Miyako asked, grabbing the bowl. I hope I didn't add too much spice. I've done that too many times to count, so. It's awesome, Naruto said, punching his fist into the air before engorging himself on the food. Miyako smiled. I'm glad to hear it. We don't get much company around here lately, seeing as Kaien doesn't bring any friends over. She gave Kaien a playful glare. Kaien chuckled. Well, I wouldn't want you to meet any of the guys from the 13th division. They are really great people, it's just I wouldn't want to bring any of them home. Naruto and Sasuke are just a lot more laid back, and I can trust them not to brag about how they had dinner with a noble. Naruto grinned. That's right. I might mention that I had dinner outside the academy, but not anything as compromising as that. Besides, what would I gain from it? Popularity, people's respect, and practically everyone's attention. Kakaku said, monotonously listing off a few things that came to her mind. Sasuke shrugged. Why would we want more of that? We get plenty right now. Miyako glanced at them. Really? Do you get a lot people watching you? Sasuke nodded. Yep. I get a lot of guys who admire my strength, and Naruto gets a lot of girls because he's a big flirt. Naruto smirked. That's right, I'm a big flirt. And there's nothing you can do to stop that. Kaien raised an eyebrow. You openly admit that you're a flirt? Naruto shrugged. It's a lot better than being called a player. That makes me sound like some kind of womanizer who wouldn't care about whatever girl he was with. I just like being around a lot of girls. Their personalities seem to mesh together. Plus, it's fun to hear what they think of all the other guys. It's actually rather funny. Kakaku glanced between the two of them. So you're a guy who's constantly surrounded by guys. And you're constantly surrounded by girls. Naruto and Sasuke nodded. Kakaku glanced at Kaien. So, which one of them would you say is gayer? Both of the boys began to glare daggers into at Kakaku. They quickly changed to Kaien when he answered. You know, I ask that question all the time. And there is never a correct answer to that question. Miyako sighed. Kaien, please play nice. There are guests after all. Kaien chuckled. Fine, but could you tell them to turn off the killer intent? It's almost scary how strong it is. Almost. Sasuke had finally figured out how the Shiba family's hierarchy was. Kaien was the fearless leader, Kakaku was sort of the queen, and Ganju could have easily been the court jester, while Miyako was the peacemaker. All in all, the most dysfunctional family that he'd ever come across since Team 7. His mind suddenly froze. Had he just thought that? Had he just put his former team on the same level as an actual family? To think that he thought Sakura was like his annoying sister, who no one really wanted around until she became serious, who was constantly clinging to others for support. Kakashi may be the uncle who would never get the picture to leave. Yet at the same time, you could always depend on him if you needed to get out of a sticky situation. But Naruto, there was a thought he never thought would hit him. He'd had a brother before, and had made up his mind about what a brother was supposed to act like. And yet, Naruto was not only fulfilling that role to a T, but was actually doing better at it than his brother ever could. Sure, his brother had turned into a family-killing psychopath, but he'd been the only brother he'd had. Naruto, he was like a brother, someone who helps you up when you're down, tries his best at everything so you'll laugh when it blows up in his face, supports you when you're facing something you couldn't take on your own, and just being there to chat about random stuff. Naruto was his brother. He mentally shrugged. We're dead, those rules don't really apply anymore. So if I have to choose someone else to be my brother, I could have done much worse. Like Ganju, he's just stupid. Sure enough, Ganju was trying to tell Naruto about how weak his technique had been, and how he'd be able to beat the gayness out of him with one punch. Naruto's eyebrows were twitching as he tried not to hit the poor guy. Unfortunately, he didn't shut up in time, said a few more stupid things, and was subsequently sent flying outside courtesy of Naruto's fist. The killing intent flared up again as he followed poor Ganju outside. Sasuke sighed. Well, I definitely could have done a lot worse. Later that night, Naruto grinned eagerly as he watched Kaien. Kaien was demonstrating how to correctly perform a Shunpa to Naruto. It was way faster than the ho-ho that he learned at the academy. His eyes barely kept track of Kaien's movements, mostly seeing only a blur moving before seeing the actual him stop to perform the technique again. After another moment, Kaien stopped in front of Naruto. Alright, that's how you perform Shunpa. Now I'll explain how you perform Shunpa. Naruto nodded eagerly, his grin widening even more as he sat down and waited for Kaien to explain. What do I have to do? It's a little more complicated than you might think, Kaien said, shaking his head at Naruto's silly actions. He had no idea how complicated it was. What you need to do is figure out which muscles you're using in your body whenever you move. Then, once you've done that, you need to figure out what you need to do with the rest of your body moves, and make them act accordingly. You then simply push your muscles to their limits so that you actually propel yourself forward. I don't get it. Naruto deadpanned, lightly smacking his head against the ground. Kaien sighed. This is going to be so much harder to explain to him. Maybe I should just. Naruto, Sasuke said, walking up to him. Naruto glanced up as Sasuke continued speaking. It's like moving the strings of a puppet in a special way to make it perform the movements you want. It could also be like a tree in the wind. It needs to bend to the point where it might snap before it moves back even faster. Kaien blinked. What are you talking about? That doesn't even relate to what. Oh, I get the second one, Naruto said, a picture of a tree branch swinging and smacking Sasuke faster than if he just smacked him with a normal branch smacking him. It was also funnier. You understood that? Kaien asked, more confused than he thought he could ever be. Sasuke had somehow managed to explain something to Naruto that he himself couldn't? That wasn't totally insane, but it was quite crazy. Naruto nodded vigorously. Yeah. I just have to tighten the muscles inside me like when you bend a tree branch, and release a few while tightening others while I move. Then I have to breathe so that the air doesn't slow me down too much. Kaien's mouth dropped. That was almost a perfect definition of Shunpa. The only real difference was that people didn't refer to the tree branches when they were discussing it. Alright. I'm going to try it now, Naruto said, quickly standing up. Focusing on the muscles in his legs, he quickly tightened certain parts of them and pushed himself forward. While not as fast as Kaien's had been, it was much faster than the normal ho-ho method. He grinned for a second in triumph until he forgot to loosen the muscles and crashed headfirst into a wall. Well, that wasn't bad for your first time, Kaien said, trying not to laugh as Naruto picked himself up. But you're going to need to concentrate more, Otherwise, you'll crash into the wall again. Naruto nodded vigorously. Alright, it's like this dope, Sasuke said, suddenly blurring towards Naruto. Kaien could easily follow the bastardized Shuinpa. However, in definition, he just performed a Shuinpa. It wasn't as fast as it could have been, yes, but it was a Shuinpa nevertheless. I'm surprised, Sasuke. You did pretty good for your first time, Sasuke shrugged. I just understood all the other stuff you said. If Naruto had listened to you or to himself for that matter, he would have realized how to stop himself from crashing into the wall. Dope. Team, Kakaku watched all this from the shadows, laughing lightly as they argued. The Tsurugi has no idea what they are getting themselves into. I can't wait to give the kid fireworks, it'll be a riot, so we're all here. Orochimaru said, slowly glancing around at the three people who were surrounding him. He wasn't at the peak of strength, as he would need to change bodies as soon as was possible, and knew that he was quite vulnerable in comparison to the three of them. He could practically feel their power as they stared him down. Itachi, Sasori, and Kisame watched the snake as he slowly attempted to stand. It had taken them nearly 6 months after their first meeting on the bridge of heaven and earth, and all three of them were quite pleased to have finally found where the snake had been hiding. They all understood what their mission was, and wouldn't fail in that respect. However, they needed to be careful. He didn't become a member of the Sannin just because he was somewhat smart, he had enough power to back him up. Even in a weakened state, they would watch him like a cornered snake, cautious until they had struck the final blow. Itachi glanced. Sasori-san, would you like to do the honors? Sasori nodded, his red hair fluttering lightly in the wind. Hi, that would be appreciated. I still must pay him back for destroying Hiriko. I quite enjoyed using him, although a puppet of a former Sannin would be an excellent new addition. Then I'll get that Kabuto boy. I'll have created 300 human puppets with you too as additions, Orochimaru chuckled. And what makes you think that you'll be able to defeat me in the first place? As he asked, he suddenly dropped to his knees in a coughing fit. As he pulled his hand away from his mouth, he realized that there was a small amount of blood in his hands. He cursed under his breath as he turned back to them. Sasori stared at him impassively. You have weakened to the point where it hurts for you to stand. He reached into his cloak, pulling out a scroll. Now, I will kill you and the boy, and create my puppets, Orochimaru growled. Don't take me lightly, he yelled as he rushed forward. Itachi, Kisame, please stand back, Sasori said as he unsealed the Sandaime Kazekage. As you wish. However, we will intervene should we deem it necessary, Itachi said, stepping back from the battle. Kisame nodded, quickly forming seals. I know. A sudden, large explosion filled the building, ripping the roof off of the entire section they had been under. Itachi and Kisame had moved to the top of the hole, staring down at Orochimaru and Sasori as the former partners faced off. Orochimaru wasted no time as he rushed forward, surprisingly fast despite his sickness. Sasori didn't flinch as he moved his hands, making the Kazekage open its mouth to spew a large amount of poison gas at him. Orochimaru formed the snake seal and slid into the ground. He quickly began to move through the ground, sliding towards Sasori. Due to the cloud, he'd created a powerful smokescreen that was now working against him. Just as he was about to attack Sasori, he stopped. Realization dawned on him as he noticed what Sasori had done. He moved forward, slowly walking himself into the very center of the gas. This would mean that if he came up to attack him, he'd be unable to get him without being poisoned. Clever, he thought, quickly moving to one of the walls. But I won't fall for it. Slowly extending himself from the earth, he glared into the poison cloud. He could barely make out the vague shape of Sasori in the center of the cloud, not yet noticing that he was being watched. Orochimaru quickly flew through a set of seals, ending on the tiger seal. Katon, Gakkaku no Jutsu. Grand Fireball Technique. The ball of flame quickly sped towards the figure in the center, pushing the poison away as it seemed to charge through. Sasori realized what was happening, and quickly jumped out of the way. As he slid next to the Kazekage, he stared over at Orochimaru. You've underestimated me, Orochimaru chuckled, trying not to show how painful that action was. I guess I should have known. I knew about the one weakness of that particular poison, that it was made from a highly combustible material. No matter what form it was in, it would quickly catch fire. You persisted in using it while I was your partner. Why did you change? Sasori sighed. Sometimes the leader's judgment disappoints me. With you, it was that I was working with someone who wished for immortality, to obtain everything in the vast expanse that you then had. Now, my partner is a pyromaniac who believes that his little fireworks are true works of art. True art is forever, Orochimaru glared. He hadn't answered his question. In fact, he'd actually avoided it. However, he wanted to get as much information about this person, just in case he had to fight him after he'd killed Sasori. True works of art? You still believe that your little puppet show is a true work of art? Please, I've seen much better works throughout my lifetime. And we both know how long that's been. Your art is obsolete, Sasori nodded, his fingers moving in a rapid pattern. So you say. However, I know something you don't. As he spoke, the Sandaime Kazekage's mouth suddenly opened, a stream of thick, sand-like objects slowly falling out. Despite your knowledge of many other arts, you will learn of why mine is truly the best and the strongest. You will learn why one of the oldest art forms is the strongest of all art forms. Setetsu, iron sand? Orochimaru said as he watched it begin to whirl around. Sasori just nodded before making the Sandaime Kazekage charge forward. Orochimaru jumped to the side, barely avoiding the brunt of the attack. He'd heard about this ability. It was something he'd tried to recreate on more than one occasion. However, to actually see someone who could use the technique who was a puppet made him growl. How dare Sasori kill off the last user of that bloodline? Now he'd never have the chance of recreating it naturally. He almost missed the next strike, as the sand tried to crash down on him. He slithered around the different strikes, trying to head towards Sasori. But every time he tried, he found his way blocked by the Kazekage puppet. He really didn't want to destroy it, as it was a rare artifact that should be preserved, but it was getting in the way of his objective. The puppet would have to go. Before he could move, his body suddenly collapsed from underneath him. He gasped as he realized what was happening. No matter how strong his will was, he couldn't stop the body he was occupying from deteriorating just yet. He looked at his blackening hands, trying to stop the world from spinning as his breath slowly became labored. In a manner of speaking, he was noticed this opening, and sent in a wave of Setetsu to finish him off. Realizing that he was currently out of options, Orochimaru opened his mouth. Itachi's eyes widened as he saw what Orochimaru was doing. By expelling the first version of his soul, he was both leaving himself vulnerable as well as with more power within his grasp. A lot of power. His eyes slowly began to morph into another shape, preparing for if he needed to use it. Sasori narrowed his eyes as he saw the real Orochimaru. So this is your true form. This is the method you followed to immortality, Orochimaru hissed, his giant body slithering around Sasori and the Kazekage. Yes. With the abilities of the White Snake, I have truly found the path to immortality. And now, I will take your body and continue my work, Sasori sighed. I highly doubt that you'd be able to do that, Orochimaru scowled. Rushing forward, he attempted to crush the Kazekage under a blunt strike. The Kazekage raised his hands, creating a dense barrier of chakra around himself and Sasori. Orochimaru screeched as he drew back his head, a small amount of blood dripping from his forehead. As he screeched, Sasori sent more Setetsu at him, trying to crush him as quickly as possible. At the last second, Orochimaru shot forward, nearly crushing the Kazekage as he slammed into the ground right in front of Sasori. Sasori sighed as his cloak blew off. Orochimaru growled as he finally realized what he'd meant before. So you turned your own body into a puppet? I finally understand how you were able to walk into that poison cloud without being poisoned yourself. His tongue slipped in and out of his mouth, showing his agitation. I guess I'll just have to kill you. He shot forward again, trying to take Sasori out as quickly as possible. Sasori quickly brought the Kazekage beside him, ready to counterattack. However, neither were necessary. As Orochimaru neared Sasori, a black flame suddenly burst on Orochimaru's skin. His eyes widened in shock as he screeched and slammed against a wall, trying to get the flames off of him. Sasori glanced up, noticing the small amount of blood that was coming out of Itachi's eyes. What a strange technique. Perhaps this is the true power he possesses? I certainly hope that I don't have to face that technique. I would definitely die. Orochimaru continued to scream in agony, unable to put the fires out. Itachi and Kisame jumped down to Sasori's side. I could have handled that by myself, you know. He has never been a true artisan, such as myself. Itachi nodded. I understand. However, I do believe that I should make a point that we told you we wouldn't interfere unless we deemed him hazardous. In the form, and with the power he possesses, we were the ones in danger. No matter how slight it was. Kisame gave Itachi a dirty look. Now what do you mean by that? That somehow, he might have gotten one of us and took over our bodies. Itachi nodded. I could see his chakra, where you cannot. The wound on his head was leaking a chakra and was turning his blood into some kind of poison. If inhaled, it would probably paralyze you until he'd taken over your body. You would then have your will crushed beneath his, and would be stuck within him as he used your body for his own means. Oh, Kisame said, trying not to show how stupid he felt. It was one of the few times he'd forgotten how many times Itachi's abilities had saved him. He was sure that he'd be able to stop that particular technique should Itachi try to use it on him, but he had plenty of other techniques that could easily be used to kill him without having to resort to that move. He glanced away, slightly embarrassed. Thanks for that. It is all right. You are my partner, and I do not wish for you to fall to someone as lowly as him. Itachi said, watching the still burning Orochimaru. He deserves this death. Now, no one will be able to recreate him or his abilities for a long time. Orochimaru screamed. This isn't possible. I am immortal. I am the closest thing to a god. No, I am God. I am all-powerful. Itachi slowly turned away from Orochimaru as he continued his rant. You are nothing more than a disgrace. Burn Orochimaru, for these flames will feel light once you cast to everlasting darkness. He walked away, letting Orochimaru's body slowly become ashes right before their eyes. Sasori had a small smirk as he sealed Orochimaru's stolen body within a scroll. It may not be his original body, but it should have the same properties. He glanced back at Itachi and Kisame, giving them a small bow. Thank you for all that you have done, Kisame shrugged. It was our job. There was a small silence as they glanced around. Just out of curiosity, what did you really want with Orochimaru's Edo Tensei, resurrection to the impure world, anyways? After all, that is what you had Kabuto sneak around to find out about, was it not? Sasori looked away, no emotion on his face. I merely wished to see how far he'd come with his technique. That is the only thing I desired of that technique, Itachi sighed. There is no need to keep secrets from us. After all, doing something like that is what eventually got Orochimaru killed. Besides, there is hardly anything you could do with the technique that would surprise us. Kisame nodded, causing Sasori to sigh. Fine. My parents died when I was young during the Second Great Shinobi War. I simply wanted to bring them back even if just for a moment. I always wondered what they were like, and the technique might have given me a chance to learn a little more. Kisame glanced at Itachi, surprise on his face. Okay, that kind of surprised me. I mean, it's not impractical, just surprising. Itachi nodded. Every person, no matter how deeply disturbed by darkness, wishes to know of their origins. It is that desire that eventually pushes some people to seek out their parents, and then there are those who completely massacre their clan, for no purpose that he will tell anyone. Kisame said, a sadistic grin on his face. Itachi suddenly began to cough, a small amount of blood getting splattered on his hand. As Kisame watched Itachi, his eyes suddenly narrowed. Itachi, have you been taking your medication? Itachi nodded, a slight grimace on his face. Hi, I've taken my medication on occasion. Meaning, I'm dying. Faster now than before since I've stopped taking the full dose. I needed some closure before I passed, and now I will be able to do so in peace. Sasori glanced between the two of them, trying to understand what was happening. After a second his eyes widened. If I'm to understand correctly, you've got some disease, poison, something. It is incurable in a manner of speaking, and you only have a matter of time left, 2 months to be more exact. Itachi said, lightly clutching his chest as he took a deep breath. So what are you going to do with your last days? Sasori asked, tilting his head to the side. You know how long you have, so what will you do with the time? I'm not sure myself. However, I'm not going to live it to the best of my abilities. He glanced over at the two of them. Please promise that you'll burn my body once I die. I don't want anyone else to get at the Uchiha's secrets. To recreate this cursed bloodline is the last thing that these nations need. The greed and pride will corrupt everyone, and destroy them from the inside out. Both of the Akatsuki members nodded, promising to do just that. As they walked away, another figure that was invisible to everyone else watched them walk away. As it watched, a strange form began to cover its face. After a moment, a dark red energy began to encircle it as it let out a loud screech. Siriidii Hollow Grounds. This is going to totally rock. Naruto yelled as his classmates slowly walked out onto the testing grounds. Most of the kids seemed really nervous about the test, and were conversing quite loudly as they tried to shake their nervousness off. The reason they were at these hollow grounds was because they were currently halfway through their 4th year. During this time, they were finally allowed to test their skills against real hollows. There were some people who complained that real hollows could get them killed, but the 12th Division didn't put much interest into the project, and subsequently, they weren't able to create a hollow Jigai that could move like a real hollow could. While this meant that this test was all the more dangerous, it was also a taste of what the real world would be like. I heard that Ikaku and Yumachika did excellent when they were here, Sasuke said, glancing around the field. Of course, they're now in 11th squad, which is really fitting for the two of them. Brawlers who love fighting with every bone in their bodies. Naruto bounced on his feet, waiting to hear the instructor's instructions on what they need to do. Hey Sasuke, which squad do you think you'll be on? Sasuke shrugged. I don't know. I mean, I have given it some thought. 11th wouldn't suit me, although I do like a good fight every now and then. 2nd Division just isn't where I feel I'd be, and all the others just have their own flaws. The only places I would fit in might be 5th, 9th, 7th, or 13th. Naruto winced. 3 of the divisions that he'd said he'd fit into were among the ones he'd labeled silent and boring. Well, the 13th Division has Kaien in it, so it wouldn't be the worst place to be, right? Sasuke shrugged. I don't know, the 9th and 7th Divisions both have things that I might need for later in my life. You didn't get a good feeling from 5th, so I'm not sure that I'd fit in there. I'm just trying to figure out which places I might be. Sasuke glanced over to Naruto. Where do you think you'll end up? Who, me? Naruto asked, pointing to himself. He scratched the back of his head nervously. I really don't know. I mean, if Yamamoto knew about all my pranks, he probably wouldn't put me in 11th Division, whether I loved fighting or not. So with that in mind, I'd have to say that I really am a misfit who can't be put anywhere. Sasuke palmed his face. You really don't have any idea of where you might end up? Or have you simply not put any effort into thinking about it? Naruto shrugged. I haven't done much thought on it, to be honest. I have had too much schoolwork to do to really think about where I might end up in the next 2.5 years, Sasuke sighed. It made sense. Kaiin had only promised to teach him Shunpa if he got good grades, and would only continue to teach him if he kept his grades up. As such, with the school curriculum getting harder, Naruto spent less time pulling pranks, and more time on his studies. Even Sasuke had to put a lot of focus into his studies despite the fact that he was revered as a genius. As he noticed the teachers motioning for them to gather around, he glanced over at Naruto. He didn't know what to think of him anymore, which had been happening a lot recently. People constantly called him a genius, or prodigy, but they never took notice to another prodigy. Naruto might not have gotten the best grades, but he most certainly did things that no one else might think about. Like how he'd been trying to work the first Hado to use to painfully restrain a hollow or person so as to make sure that they didn't have any way to escape. When he'd seen one of his prototypes, he'd been shocked by the results. He'd nearly destroyed the dummies that he'd been practicing with, and a portion of the area behind them. Quite impressive considering it was only the first Hado. When he imagined other enhanced Hado, he shook his head. There was no need for him to think of that right now. If he was distracted, he might get killed by one of the hollows. He glanced up, catching the last bit of what the teacher was saying. Strap on your locators, and we'll get this started. Naruto and Sasuke walked up and grabbed one of their locators. They were weird wristbands that had little screens on the back. The screens told how many hollows they'd defeated, compared to how many more they need to pass. They were all excited, although a few of the people seemed hesitant to put the locator on. What's up with them? Naruto asked, quickly strapping on his locator. It's just E-ranked hollows, nothing big, Sasuke groaned. They're not people who want to go out and fight hollows. You know how these people are like the pansies who don't want to fight for any reason whatsoever. Naruto smirked. Oh well, more for me. Sasuke glanced at Naruto. You okay, Naruto? I thought you said you didn't think you'd be in the 11th division. Naruto smirked. Yeah, but I said it wouldn't be because I dislike fighting. I love it when we fight. Our blood gets pumping, I can stretch myself to new lengths, and my thoughts become so clear. It's the best feeling ever. A few people around him sweat dropped. They'd never heard Naruto so enthusiastic unless it was for some new technique, or ramen. And since that wasn't that often anymore, it was almost relieving to see him acting up again. It brought comfort to people's sanity. Shut up back there and head through the doors, the teacher yelled, motioning to several doors that were slowly opening. The class quickly rushed through, none of them wanting to be left behind. Leading them was Naruto, who had somehow made it around the mob of students, and into the lead position in the group. Sasuke just shook his head as he raced out as well. The field where they were at was nothing grand or spectacular. However, the hollows that were around the place made it much more dangerous than it would normally be. Drew his sword, waiting for the instructors to give them the okay. He was so going to enjoy this. A voice came over the loudspeakers, making all of the students, and hollows, glance upward. Alright, you must cleanse 5 hollows within the time limit. As soon as you have, you will come back through the doors. Ready, go! The students quickly began to disperse, jumping in random directions as they attempted to catch the hollows off guard. The hollows, however, did notice them before they go to them, and nearly all were able to block the first strike. The only exceptions were the 2 which faced off against Naruto and Sasuke. Naruto laughed as he split the hollow in half, quickly moving on to the next one. It was almost too easy for him to defeat these hollows. They were much easier than the practice dummies that he practiced on back at the Shiba's house. He didn't waste any time getting to the next one, happily slicing through its arm as he moved about to attack its mask. Sasuke, on the other hand, was glancing around at his classmates. He watched them struggle to land a solid strike against the hollows, too inexperienced to understand what they needed to do. He himself wasn't any kind of expert. However, he didn't have trouble hitting the hollows when he was on the offense. He eventually singled out a particularly strong hollow and took chase, wanting to make sure that it didn't hurt anyone. The instructors watched him passively as the class quickly attacked the hollows. Each of them would react differently to the danger. Some of them would react well, others not so much. As they watched, they quickly singled out 3 of the strongest members of the class. Sasuke, who had just finished off his 3rd hollow, was the class prodigy. It was expected of him to obtain Shirkai within a short period of time after he graduated, during the academy if he could. He was proficient with Bakudo, as well as many forms of Zanjutsu. He was popular with the students, and a natural-born leader. He would be an excellent addition to the Shinigami ranks. Naruto, who was currently engaged with his final hollow, was one of the strangest people they'd ever met. He could stare down even the toughest teacher without blinking twice, and would berate them about how stupid their curriculum was. Yet, he showed constantly growing skills in the art of Hakuda, Kido, and while a more bastardized version, Zanjutsu. He was almost a jack of trades, constantly improving himself, while thinking up new ways of doing things. He would be difficult, although a stronger addition for the Shinigami ranks. Finally, there was Mizukira Sora. He was a close friend of Naruto's, and was more than willing to put his neck on the chopping block to get his friends out of trouble. He didn't have any strength in any particular subject, but that would probably change later on during his career. He and Naruto were the closest of friends, yet not joined at the hip, as he was with Sasuke. Naruto grimaced as he, Sasuke, and Sora walked out of the hollow grounds. They'd finished quickly, and would now be forced to wait for everyone else to finish up. None of them spoke as they walked over to the observation booth. After a couple of seconds of watching, Naruto glanced over to the instructors. "Hey, do any of you guys have any popcorn?" The instructors gave him a confused glance. Shrugged. "I'm just saying, these guys aren't going to do so well, so I might as well have something to eat while I'm watching them." Sasuke shook his head. "You know, you could spend some time trying to get to know your Zanpakuto spirit. Talking to him might actually help you to hear his name." Naruto glanced away. "Yeah, well, I haven't looked at him yet," Sora chuckled. "You mean, after a year of talking to him nonstop, you still don't know what he looks like?" Naruto grimaced. "It's not my fault. I just can't remember faces without names or vice versa," Sasuke sighed. "And while you're doing that, I'm going to be even closer to hearing my Zanpakuto's name." He sat down in a meditative stance, taking a deep breath. "Tell me when the exams are over." Naruto nodded. After a moment, he glanced back out again. "This totally sucks, you know?" Sora nodded. "I know. It is one of the few things that we can't control, and probably won't be able to for a while." Naruto shrugged. "I guess that means that we suck, eh?" He glanced over to Sora, a big grin on his face. Sora grinned back, an amused look in his eyes. "I wouldn't say that. I would say we're powerless. We don't get to choose what happens, we just have to follow it till we get to the end." "That was almost philosophical of you, Sora," Naruto said, stretching himself out. After a couple of seconds, he glanced over at the instructors. "Hey, why can't we hear anything going on in there?" One of the instructors glanced over. "We do not need to hear all of the little kids whining about how they want their mommies because they can't handle an E-ranked hollow. After a while, it becomes far too troublesome. So, what if someone gets seriously injured out there? That would mean that they didn't train hard enough during the 7 years we've given them to prepare," another instructor said, leaning back in his chair. "Besides, nothing weird or dangerous ever happens in there." Sora glanced out the window, a curious look on his face. "So you've never had a hollow try to break out of here before?" The instructor scoffed. "They never tried to get out. There's so much spirit energy in there that they tried to get a feast out of it." Sora nodded. "So you've had dealings where other hollows attempt to get in to join this feast, correct?" "What are you talking about?" the instructor asked, setting his chair down as he glanced at Sora. Naruto glanced out the window, noticing what Sora was talking about. "I think he means those little hollow portals that have just shown up." All of the instructors quickly stood up, trying to see for themselves what they were talking about. Sure enough, scattered across the training ground were several portals in which multiple hollows were stepping out. And not all of them were E-ranked. "Holy crap, there's a D rank in there!" one of the instructors shouted, pointing at a hollow with a monkey-like mask that had entered into the hollow grounds. "It's got a record. 3 Shinigami have been killed by that hollow. They call it the crushing column." Sasuke's eyes snapped open. "What?" The instructor ignored him. "We've got to get them out of there. They won't stand a chance against something like that." "No! We can't open the door. None of us have achieved Shirkai, and we'll all be sitting ducks that it'll just take out one by one." Another instructor shouted back. "What are you, crazy? If we let them die, it'll be a black mark on our records. We'll never be allowed to teach again." "So what? At least we'll be alive. We shouldn't waste our lives because some wimps couldn't handle a scary hollow. They're just academy students. What could they do against something like that?" As the teachers bickered amongst themselves, Sora spoke up. "Do we really have time for an argument like this?" Sora asked, glancing at Naruto and Sasuke. "People will die if something isn't done." Sasuke nodded. "Well then, since they're indecisive, we'll have to do something about this." Naruto grinned. "I want the big one. He sounds like he needs to be put in his place." The three of them rushed back out, unnoticed by their bickering instructors. "Outside, let's get this party started," Naruto yelled as he rushed into the battle. "Don't hold back, Naruto. These guys are stronger than the ones we fought before," Sasuke yelled, quickly rushing after him. "Don't kill too many, Naruto. I still want to get my hands on a few myself," Sora yelled, quickly slashing at the nearest hollow. The three of them charged through the incoming hollows without hesitation. Naruto, the heavy brawler, was at the point, quickly slamming into the hollows that got in their way. Sasuke, the strategist, was quickly slashing at the hollows that tried to attack from either side of them. Sora, a more fundamental brawler, took up the rear to catch any of the stranglers who Naruto and Sasuke missed. The students who were fighting, and some of the stupider hollows, stopped to watch them as they tore their way towards the center of the hollow grounds. They moved together, in perfect unison as they made their way forward. They acted as though they had done this before, each of them watching the others back. This is what there had all been for. This was what their fighting and training had prepared them to do. Naruto let out a loud war cry as he struck another hollow. Spinning around, he jabbed his hand towards another's mask. Hado 31, Shikaho, Crimson Flame Cannon. A burst of red energy quickly sped towards the hollow, blowing it apart from the pressure. Naruto's grin widened. "Yeah! I'm the best, Naruto! Watch out!" Sora yelled, his eyes widening in surprise. Naruto looked somewhat confused as he turned around. As he finally realized what danger he was in, it was already too late. The crushing column had gotten behind him, and slammed its hands into Naruto. Naruto fell under the full weight of its hands, getting slammed into the ground hard. "You little piece of crap," it said, grinding its hands into Naruto's chest as he screamed out in pain. "Who do you think you are? Some kind of Shinigami superhero? You're pathetic, Naruto!" Sasuke yelled, rushing towards the hollow. Swing upwards, he attempted to cleave the hollow's arm from the rest of his body. However, the hollow saw it coming and was able to backhand Sasuke away before he could get close. The hollow barked and howled as he watched their classmates cower in fear. "And the other hollows have no idea that this place exists. I will dine like a king today, and show my strength for all to see." He continued to bark and howl as he slammed his fists into Naruto, beating on him like he was a miniature bongo. Naruto was slowly losing consciousness, barely feeling the weight and strength of the blows anymore. As he felt himself sinking deeper within himself, he had only a few thoughts left. Am I going to die? Is this the end? I never even got to know my Zanpakuto's name, not even some funny nickname. I'm so stupid. You're human, you make mistakes, his inner spirit told him, trying to give him some solace as darkness began to overcome him. I should have been stronger, smarter, faster, something. Rest, it's the only thing you can do for now. Your friends will take care of the rest. Seeing their friend in trouble, Sora and Sasuke roared as they slammed into the hollow, knocking it away from Naruto. Not even bothering to use their swords, they kicked the hollow as far away as they could get it. Sasuke glanced at the students who were still in the area. Everyone, get out of here now. You need to get back to the entrance and get out of here, otherwise you'll die. Please move. They didn't need a second warning, as the students quickly made their way out of the area. Some of the hollows tried to follow, but were cut off by Sora, who was jumping in and out of them to make sure they made it off safely. Sasuke took a shaky breath as he turned back to the crushing column, who was just getting up. Now that all the distractions are out of the way, let's dance. Sasuke and the hollow charged at each other, each of them trying to land a blow on the other. Sasuke would swing with perfect, fast strikes that would only miss by the smallest margins. The hollow, on the other hand, simply tried to smash Sasuke whenever he could. It was only due to Kaien's training and a few timely shunpas that he was able to hold his own. Sasuke panted as the battle began to wear on. He wasn't sure how long they'd been fighting anymore. But if it continued, he wouldn't make it. Growling, he used a quick shunpa to get within the hollow's guard. Unable to do anything, it could only widen its eyes in surprise as Sasuke hacked off one of its legs. Sasuke grinned in triumph. He'd finally gotten a hit on the hollow, he could fight it. Now, he could win. However, as he turned around, he realized that something was wrong. The hollow wasn't moving in for a counter-strike. In fact, it wasn't behind him at all anymore. After he'd struck it, it had somehow managed to make its way towards Naruto. His eyes widened as he quickly counted the amount of steps it would take to get to him. I'm not going to make it. Using a quick burst of speed, he rushed after the hollow, hoping and praying that he wouldn't be too late. But as he neared it, he saw the hollow launching its head forward, preparing to eat Naruto's soul. No! After all this time, am I so weak? Will I really just let him die? No! Just as he was about to yell out some kind of Kido, another blur suddenly shot in front of Naruto. Sasuke's eyes widened as he watched a torrent of blood suddenly burst from in front of the hollow. For a second, he felt relief that someone had gotten the hollow before it had gotten Naruto. But as the hollow backed up, he realized the cost for Naruto's life as Sora's body suddenly went limp and collapsed in a wrecked heap. Sasuke continued his rush over to Sora, ignoring the hollow as it simply gave him a curious look. Sora, hey Sasuke, Sora said, a distant look in his eyes as he glanced up at him. How are you? Sasuke shook his head. Baka. You're dying, is that what this is? Funny, it doesn't feel like dying to me, Sora said, his voice cracking as he chuckled. I feel like I've just tried to stop Naruto from getting in line at an all-you-can-eat ramen stand. Sasuke laughed, trying to understand why Sora was as peaceful as he was. Hey, if you're dying, do you want any last words? Sora nodded. Yeah, I'd like that. Could you tell Naruto that ramen will stunt his growth if he eats it all the time? No one seems to have the guts to tell him. Sasuke nodded. Don't worry, I'll tell him. And could you tell Sasuke he doesn't need to be afraid? Sora said, coughing up a little blood as he continued talking. He doesn't need to be afraid of making friends. Just tell him he's put a lot of effort into them, and he shouldn't waste something so precious. Sasuke blinked, trying to understand what Sora had just said. After a couple of seconds, he reached a hand up to his neck. Not feeling a pulse, he felt tears well up. Sora was dead. Oh, how touching. Too bad I don't have a heart to feel for you, the hollow said, laughing at the sight. You Shinigami are all way too sentimental. One of you dies, and your whole world goes to hell. Sasuke slowly stood up, his eyes shadowing the upper portion of his face. You know, I didn't know Sora as well as the next guy. But there's something you should know. The hollow's eyes widened as Sasuke's Ryatsu suddenly began to spike, the golden coloration whirling around violently, forming around his blade as he suddenly glanced up. He was one of the people that I found to be of worth. He had merit where it counted. He swung his sword forward. Now I'll show you what that means. As his Ryatsu continued to spike, his Zanpakuto spirit suddenly appeared behind him. Do you hear anything? Sasuke nodded. I hear everything. I can see everything. Are you afraid of this hollow? Sasuke gritted his teeth. I'm not afraid of scum like that. He could almost feel the approval that was coming from within himself. Then it is time. Hear me, Uchiha. My name is… Sasuke's eyes narrowed, as he slowly began to speak. Higuzuya Yama, strike the mountains, inside the observation booth. What's going on in here? The instructors jumped at the sudden intrusion. They nearly asked who it was, until they realized that they were facing 3 captains. Oh, Kichiki Taicho, Anohana Taicho, Yukitake Taicho, what brings you here? Some of your students came and got us, Yukitake said, glancing out into the field. They said something about a dangerous hollow in the hollow grounds, and that there were some injured people who needed help. He smiled at them as he continued, sorry it took us a while, there weren't any 4th Division members around and it took a while to find Anohana-san. It's quite alright, Taicho, the instructor said, quickly bowing to the 3 of them. So, what appears to be the problem? Unohana asked, glancing at the instructors. Well, during our training exercise, a D-ranked hollow entered the arena. We tried to get the door open, but there were so many hollows on the other side that we couldn't. We understand. You were afraid that the hollows would get you as well, Yukitake said, cutting the instructor off. However, I would like to hear the rest of the real story. We were arguing about whether or not we should help the students and risk our careers either way. 3 of our students who had already passed the exam opened the door and went out. Wait, are you telling us that you let 3 of your students handle what you should have done? Byakuya said, trying to better understand what he just heard. Teachers were requiring help from their students? Yes? One of the instructors said, sheepishly glancing at the ground. They snuck out on us before we came to a decision. And that was? Unohana asked, glancing at all of them. Another one of the instructors glanced down sheepishly. Watched them try and to figure out how they would handle a really tough hollow. When he saw the captain's shocked expressions, he quickly decided to explain. They'd reacted too quick for us to do anything but watch. Plus, they were actually doing a really good job. Were? Byakuya said, raising an eyebrow. Yeah, about that. One of the instructors said, glancing out the window. It looks like 2 of them just died. What? Yukitake shouted, quickly moving to the window to see for himself. Outside, the scene was not comforting. Sora had the front portion of his chest torn apart, leaving most of his body open for the world to see. Naruto was lying motionless on the ground, a few ribs poking out of his chest, slightly staining his clothes. And Sasuke was trying to stand up against the largest hollow there, along with all of the other hollows in the immediate area. We need to get in there, now! As the instructors fumbled along, trying to open the doors, a bright flash suddenly illuminated the area. The 3 captains looked on, noticing the power surge that had suddenly come from within the area. After a moment, when the dust died down, what they saw shocked them. Did you know he could? Byakuya asked, glancing over to Yukitake. Yukitake shook his head. This is the first time I've seen it. To be honest, it sweets him. Unohana nodded. It seems like we will be getting an excellent recruit to our ranks a little earlier than expected. All 3 of them nodded as they watched Sasuke re-engage his battle with the hollow. Hollow grounds, Raikiri, lightning edge. Sasuke roared as he and his sword were enveloped in Ryatsu. His sword glowed brightly as it began to morph into its new shape, expelling so much Ryatsu that it kicked up a giant dome of dirt as it glowed, obscuring the view of almost everyone. As the dust finally settled, Sasuke emerged from within, wielding his blade's new form. Its blade was almost as long as before, being twice as thick as a normal blade, and pitch black in color. The blade was greatly curved, with a great deal of metal supporting the back edge. Its guard had been replaced with something that resembled a little ball of dark fur, giving it a demonic, powerful feeling. The sword's grip had also changed, extending to at least 3 feet in length of darkened wood. At the end of the blade was a long, tightly bound, almost whip-like piece of leather. It looked like a bastardized Naginata in all respects. Longer than he was tall, Sasuke carried it through the dust with a fire in his eyes that would make many other people back away in fear. He was a man out for justice. Round 2. Sasuke said, quickly rushing towards his foe. The crushing column tried to backpedal as it saw Sasuke charge forward. Gone was the boy that he knew he could easily crush. In his place was a monster, a demon of sorts. Simply the raw energy was giving him a difficult time moving. He was beyond fear. He'd crossed at the moment Sasuke had finished speaking. No, he was terrified of what this monster would do to him once he got his hands on him. Sasuke leapt into the air, his blade in both hands as he swung down. While he didn't look it anymore, he was tired. And releasing Shirkai was more exhausting than many people would like to believe it to be. All that power and no control over any of it. Sasuke grimaced as the hollow jumped back, avoiding his blow. He wasn't going to be able to hold it back much longer. Sorry, I've got to end this now, Sasuke said, quickly rushing forward. Wait. You don't know what you're… The crushing column managed to get out, before Sasuke suddenly unleashed everything that he'd been holding back. The resounding explosion shook the entire room, blowing what could have at one point in time been called the crushing column into tiny pieces. Sasuke struggled for breath as he slammed his sword into the ground. He needed to stay up, to keep fighting. He was on his last leg, and wouldn't be able to do much, but it would be more than if he fell asleep. Hearing a low growl from behind him, he slowly turned around. His eyes widened as he saw a hollow trying to make its way over to Naruto, who was still unconscious. "No!" he shouted, pulling his sword from the ground and chucking it at the hollow. It quickly sped towards it, catching it completely off guard as it slammed through its mask. After a moment, the blade reverted back to its normal katana shape, and the hollow disappeared. Sasuke grimaced, realizing that he was now an open target for all of the hollows in the room. "Well, I guess this is it." "Yes, it is." Sasuke tried to turn around, but a sudden, sharp pain that suddenly shot through his side stopped him. He glanced down, seeing a hollow's claw sticking through his stomach. He coughed, a small amount of blood following the violent upheaval. "Damn, this is the end. I wasn't strong enough, was I? I hope that I'll see everyone in whatever comes after this dump. Sayonara Naruto Kai and Mina, Chire, Senbon Sakura, Scatter, Thousand Cherry Blossoms." Sasuke's eyes widened in surprise as he heard the voice shout out such a foreign phrase. He felt something behind him cutting through the hollow, and the claw in his stomach disappeared. He coughed again, feeling the violent pain suddenly shooting through him as a sudden pressure began to crash on him. Finally at his limit he collapsed. Unohana glanced at Sasuke, as she summoned her Zanpakuto as well. "You did good, boys. Now rest." Captain's meeting. As the captain's meeting came to order, Yamamoto slowly sat up. "Kuratsuchi Mayuri, please step forward." There were 12 very displeased glares as the captain of the 12th Division, Kuratsuchi Mayuri, stood in the center of the room. He glanced between the different captains, not bothering to cover up the fact that he didn't want to be there. "Kuratsuchi, this is why we've been telling you to get your people working on the project. That way, we wouldn't have any injuries or losses. You've put this off for long enough." Kuratsuchi gave Yamamoto an uninterested glance. "I would, it's just that I don't have the time with all the other research that I've been doing. Plus, if I don't finish this research, then the Suriide I could easily." "Enough of your excuses. If we don't have Shinigami who can handle those problems in the future, then there would be no point to your current projects," Yukite said, almost glaring at Kuratsuchi. He had seen what Kuratsuchi had been working on, and had been disgusted. To think that he was trying to experiment on his own body, it wasn't a pretty sight. Kuratsuchi raised an eyebrow. "Eh? Is someone getting a little sentimental over the loss of a washout or two?" Yukite's glare continued, but he showed no signs of answering. Kuratsuchi almost sent another barb, but was cut off by Toshiro. "I don't understand why you haven't just gotten it done. It's not like you don't have the time, or that the project is difficult. You're simply lazy on matters that you are ordered to perform. Isn't that right?" Kuratsuchi glared at Toshiro. "What would a little brat like you know about what goes on in the 12th Division?" "I know a lot considering everyone dumps their paperwork on my desk every day. It would be nice if I could see the light of day every now and then for reasons other than captain's meetings," Toshiro said, getting apologetic glances from the other captains. "Besides, you almost never do anything out of the goodness of your heart. You would set up a defense just so that you would know where the flaws were so that you could take advantage of them and obtain more experimental materials. Isn't that right?" Kuratsuchi glared at Toshiro. "You've got a big mouth, boy. If I recall, I've helped save countless lives through some of the new technology that I've created. Many more lives would have been lost to hollow attacks that they wouldn't have seen coming." Before Toshiro could retaliate, Yamamoto spoke up. "Enough. This argument is pointless. You will complete the task that I have given you, or else I will remove you from the 12th Division." Kuratsuchi's eyes widened. It was unheard of for someone to be removed from a captain's seat. Retired or killed, but never removed. It was unheard of. "You can't do that. By all rights, you simply inherited your position from the previous captain. While it is true that you have been able to perform Bankai, I should point out that you were never submitted to take the captain's exams. If you do not finish what you're supposed to, I can remove you from your position, as well as prevent you from taking the exam in the future." Kuratsuchi glanced at Yamamoto, grimacing as he realized that the Soteicho was not joking around this time. He let out an angry sigh. "Very well, Genryusai Soteicho." As he walked out, a few of the captain heard him muttering to himself. "I swear, I'll find out who's nearly ruined me and they will pay." Yamamoto ignored the comment as he turned back to the captains. "Now, there's a small matter on the topic of Uchiha Sasuke and the release of his Shurikai." Nearly an hour later, the meeting was finally adjourned. For now, Sasuke would be moved to a place where he could better train his new abilities without harming anyone else. It was for the good of everyone that this be done. As the other captains began to walk out, one of them stayed behind, giving Yamamoto a meaningful glance. After the last person had left, and the doors closed behind them, Yamamoto walked over to a tea table. "Would you like some tea for our discussion, Unohana-san?" Unohana shook her head. "No, this will only take but a moment. I merely have a few questions as to this object that I found on one of the students we pulled from the hollow grounds." As she spoke, she placed an item on Yamamoto's desk. With an almost curious gleam in his eyes, he slowly picked it up. Where did you say you got this? As I said before, from one of the boys which fought in the Hollow's grounds today. She pulled a file from her kimono, showing it to Yamamoto. Here's the one it was pulled from, as well as a file on how badly injured they were from the battle. Yamamoto nodded, slowly glancing over the file. After a moment, he sighed. I thought this was all behind us. I suppose that history does have a habit of repeating itself. But then it's been